Let's start this video off with a confession. I do not like this game. No matter how hard I try, how many hours of gameplay I put in, or how many YouTube videos I watch about it, something about The Witcher 3 has always felt off to me ever since its release over 8 years ago. And 2023 is the year that I finally decided to put my thoughts about the game on paper and into a video. Even nowadays, almost everyone I know that has played it still loves the game. Every reviewer except the occasional outlier has raved about the game ever since its release. It has made countless best games of all time lists, videos are made to this day still praising the game, saying how many of its mechanics have aged magnificently.
The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is an artistic masterpiece in every sense of the word, one I cannot wait to one day see toppled by another title. But that day is likely to be far away, if it ever comes at all.
Overall, The Witcher 3's next-gen update is an impressive collection of new features, tweaks, and enhancements that make one of the best RPGs in the last decade even better.
To answer the question that I posed at the beginning of the video, yes, The Witcher 3 is still undoubtedly one of the best games ever created.
But is it worth coming back to or playing for the very first time in 2023? Abso-fucking-lutely, dude. This game is amazing. And it's a must-play for any fan of open-world fantasy RPGs.
I am more than impressed with how well this thing has aged. I was a little worried when we started this that I would hop back in and be like, oh, so many things about this are clunky and weird and off, and I don't think it's aged well, and my opinions changed and all that. It's actually aged really, really well. And all I want to do is go back through it.
I don't get it. I don't. I really, really don't. I'm sorry, but I don't. And I want to talk about it because it feels like I'm going insane in the membrane. Before getting into the critique proper, it is worth mentioning that in preparation for this video, I have played through The Witcher 1, which took me about 40 hours, The Witcher 2, which took about 25 hours, and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which took about 125 hours. I even made sure to import my saves in between games and even go back to see some alternate results depending on my choices in these games. Most importantly, I currently have around 300 hours in The Witcher 3, and by the time I finish this video, those 300 hours are bound to just go higher and higher as I need more and more footage and do even more and more testing. However, it should also be noted that I have not read any of the novels or short stories written by Andrzej Sapkowski. The only thing I know about them is their ending due to the fact that the Witcher games take place some years after the ending of the books and reference that event multiple times.
Not much. Look below. I know the moves. Through it, parry, cut.
So while I understand that I may not be the most qualified person out there to talk about this game, I still feel like so many of its flaws have absolutely nothing to do with the books themselves. So many glaring flaws in the story, characters, combat, exploration, and many other parts can be pointed out in this game alone without even having to compare it to its prequels, any other role-playing games, or even the source material.
My favorite type of magic. Lesbomancy.
The flaws of The Witcher 3 dampened the entire experience of what is otherwise a great game to such a strong degree that I many times find myself questioning what I even like about the game. And that is what I want to shine a light on in this video, all the ways I feel like this game could be improved and hopefully will be improved when inevitably The Witcher 4 is released. Kaer Morhen serves as the introductory dream sequence to most of the basic features of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. In the first room, we are introduced to the basics of movement, spotting important items and how to interact with them, aka Witcher sense, dialogue choices,
I don't want to be reasonable.
Aha, so that's the way the wind blows.
And many of the basics of the HUD, such as the minimap and objectives, in what is a very effective tutorial. In one room, in just under 5 minutes, you get a great feeling for how you can interact with the world outside of combat, and on subsequent playthroughs you can even ignore everything about it, only pick up the key needed to unlock the door that lets you progress, and continue onwards towards Vesemir and Ciri.
Time to wake up, Master. These lessons so boring they put you to sleep too?
After waking Vesemir from his slumber, you learn that he's been teaching Ciri about ghouls and Al-Ghouls. Two very dangerous types of monsters that are quite popular in these lands, yet the teachings proved so boring that Vesemir himself fell asleep, and Ciri saw this as an opportunity to sneak out and get some practice on the pendulum.
Circus pirouette. Enough. Get down.
With a flip?
What do you think?
After that absolutely banger backflip, you may then partake in the basics of parkour in a race to see who's faster between you and Ciri. Running through the walls of Kaer Morhen, you learn how to jump, scale, climb, sprint, and ignore ladders and just drop down right next to them. Always ignore the ladders, never use the goddamn ladders, the ladders are Satan's spawn. Which leads to combat training. Here you learn the basics of parrying, dodging, attacking, and using signs, which are the Witcher's equivalent to magic. And after you successfully show that you understand the basics and don't want to practice anymore, you wake up and are promptly thrown into a hostile open world to use everything you've just learned and apply it in practice. However, not before the game ruins this idyllic dream with a terrifying omen.
I've long awaited this, and you, White Wolf.
Not so fast, kiddo.
Because before continuing on with the story and mechanics of the game, I want to take some time to give proper praise to not just the world of The Witcher, but the Kaer Morhen section of the game in particular, because soon when we start talking in depth about the mechanics of The Witcher 3, all semblance of praise is going out the goddamn window. So while we are in the act of praising the game and listing off all the things it does well, please allow me to add a few more things to that list.
So it begins.
The fact that the tutorial is a dream sequence is, for lack of a better word, fantastic. Since the decisions you make have no bearing on the overall story or world, it lets the player skip most of it on subsequent playthroughs in about a minute, while still being a pretty effective learning tool for many aspects of the game yet to come for new players.
Should work on the basics. Even skilled masters need to hone the fundamentals.
It is drop-dead gorgeous like most of the game and makes for a great opening set piece. An opening set piece that works on multiple layers. From my understanding, dreams and more specifically nightmares in this universe bear the chance of being secret omens. Omens of something bad or good that's going to happen in the future, has happened in the past, or is occurring right now.
What did you dream? I've had nothing but nightmares lately. Pretty horrible.
Likewise, for the most part. In one, a monster grown from a stillborn child chased you. Ugh, that was horrible.
Later on in the game, you will get in contact with a professional dreamer to hopefully help you find Ciri, your non-biological daughter, and who most of the story will be revolving around. And yet even a person specialized in dreams will have great troubles putting together anything coherent from the pieces of information you give them. The entire dream is choppy, makes little sense. Ciri is represented by a swallow bird, which I get it, Ciri's elven name is Zireael, which in the common tongue means swallow. There's a sexual joke I can make here. Meanwhile, Kaer Morhen, with the knowledge of how important of a role dreams and prophecies play in this world, and the fact that so many details are perfectly crafted in this section, from the immaculate depiction of Kaer Morhen itself to Vesemir, Ciri's, Yennefer's and Geralt's demeanor, and even the type of attire Yen wears and the perfumes she uses. So many minute details show that this isn't just another dream or some very vivid retelling of past events, but that it is indeed a very important and disturbing premonition of things to come. Dreams are but a small section of this world whose history can be traced back thousands of years before the games even take place. A world that used to only be populated by elves, dwarves and a few other races, some now long forgotten, that through an event called the Conjunction of Spheres got introduced to chaos, magic, curses, prophecies, new diseases and of course, monsters. This is where the world pulls the rug right out from underneath you. Monsters aren't necessarily evil. Just because something has the physical features and characteristics of a monster doesn't mean that they want to harm anybody. Quite on the contrary, many times you'll see yourself aiding these so-called monsters, alleviating them of their pain and anguish, and find yourself loading your very own race. Humans, through their greed and bloodlust, have claimed these lands for their own with little to no regard for the well-being of other races. They wage wars, segregate non-humans, and make them live in borderline unlivable conditions for most of their life, and when they need a scapegoat, they publicly hang them, torture them, burn them at the stakes, or worse.
None! I wanted only to live like you! Help me, kind folk! Please!
And yet, venture into lands where humans haven't built walls and drowners, ghouls, neckers and many a monster roam about, terrorizing the local populace, somehow making the racist and murderer-infested walls of the cities seem safe in comparison. It is a cruel, unforgiving and often downright depressing view of the world where words spoken in anger or sadness can inadvertently be turned into curses. Babies born in the wrong time frame are cast out and treated as monsters even if there is no merit for such treatment. People are murdered, tortured and burned at the stake, sometimes on the whim of a single madman who just so happened to become king, but more often than not just as a sport or as payback for a few stolen crowns.
Sir, Midhonor, help us!
My men need some diversion from time to time. They get jumpy elsewise.
Unbeknown to most of the world, beings and prophecies that could on a whim bring the end of the populated world as they know it coexist with humans and sometimes right under their noses. Higher vampires, the Wild Hunt, and many similar forces are usually treated as myths, legend, or the ramblings of a madman, while being just as real as the death and disease scattered throughout the lands. Most of the time, they want nothing to do with the world of men, operating on their own motives and beliefs, while other times they pose real, tangible threats and need to be hunted down and murdered before they wreak havoc and chaos among the population. But it's not just the high fantasy and low fantasy parts of these games that are treated with such love and care, it's also the ridiculously minute details that make this world feel like a real lived-in place. It feels like every being you interact with in these games has their own story, background, motivations, and place in the world. Different races don't see eye to eye in the matters of philosophy, religion, even creation and ownership of land. And even understanding all of this, it's only after playing through the games and then watching the critiques made by Joseph Anderson on the first two games that I fully started to understand the insane levels of tiny details CD Projekt Red placed in this world.
Beautifully, this is exactly how it is in the books and the larger world of The Witcher. Information isn't always reliable. There are lore books in this game that lie to you because CD Projekt thought about how these books would actually be created, by flawed sources with unreliable perspectives or dishonest ambitions. I can 100% confirm for you that humans aren't originally from this world, but this book in the game is going to tell you otherwise. Elvish propaganda, it's got to be. Magic is the source of all evil. Witchers don't have feelings, they're emotionless mutants.
Even the books that in most other games would just be used as lore dumps by the developers are treated as information you need to read with a critical lens and compare it to pre-existing information to confirm which pieces of it are even true and which of them aren't. Trust me, I could go on forever, but for the sake of brevity and because this video is already shaping up to be way too long, I cut pretty sizable chunks out from this part of the script. And even then, there are probably people out there watching that are asking themselves, why is this important? Why are we wasting so much time on something so banal as world building? Well, because the world building and characters that populate said world are far and away the best parts of these games, and unfortunately to me, one of the only few parts worth discussing in depth. Lord knows it's not the fucking combat system that deserves any lengthy discussion. How would such a corrupt, broken world even function? A world infested with so many monsters that children are violently mutated into monster hunting machines only to be seen as monsters themselves by the local populace. A world where sorcerers and sorceresses are already strong enough to bring down entire firestorms from the heavens while also brewing potions to help them influence even the most just of rulers to their side. A world where the common folk would rather kill you than pay you a few crowns for a job well done. And ultimately, a world headed towards inevitable destruction where the only chance of salvation lies in the unstable powers of a young girl whose life can be lost by something as simple as the strike of a blade, impalement from a stray arrow, or something much, much worse.
No.
Now, the first thing I want to make blatantly obvious is that I have a major problem with this section of the game. For now, the only thing you need to understand is that this game has an inverted difficulty curve, meaning that the game starts off as incredibly difficult but gets much easier along the way. I tried writing and rewriting the script in many different ways to try and talk about these issues in depth here at the beginning, but I always found it way too confusing and overbearing with the amount of information I need to present. So for the foreseeable future, aka the next few parts of the video, I will focus solely on presenting the story and characters of The Witcher 3. You are Geralt of Rivia.
I hate portals.
You and your father figure / mentor Vesemir are hot on the trail of the sorceress Yennefer of Vengerberg, Yen for short. After a trek through a now silent battlefield that you can later even visit, you make camp at a nearby tree on a hill and fall asleep. This leads to the tutorial section in Kaer Morhen that we already discussed, and upon waking up you can either skip the discussion of your nightmare or talk about it with Vesemir. In any case, the sun starts to rise. You follow your only clue, a letter written to you by Yen that tells you to meet her at a tavern in White Orchard.
What's this postscript? I still have the unicorn?
That's private. Very private.
After a small ambush by a couple of ghouls and possibly picking up the Ravenskull Yen lost in the cinematic, you and Vesemir slowly make your way through the now war-ravaged land in search of the tavern. On the path, you find a merchant being attacked by a griffin, and after saving him, you can either demand payment and be sent on your way with the information on where and how to find the tavern and a few more coins added to your purse, or refuse any payment and in turn learn that the tavern you're looking for is owned by his cousin Elsa, who as thanks for saving her cousin and not taking his money, gives you some roasted chicken legs. After talking to the customers of this fine establishment, perhaps playing your first round of Gwent,
the earth shall revolve around the sun before you comprehend these rules,
and even being able to use your Axii sign on a person in an attempt to gather information on Yen,
folks say the lady rode through the village a few days back. Galloping so fast she knocked Radabor into a ditch.
You come across
a mangy vagrant, gone to Rodim, At your service.
After buying 2 schnapses and you either refusing or accepting this offer, he quickly reveals to not only know you and Yen from Dandelion's ballads, but also exactly where she went.
Before you appeared, it never occurred to me that might have been Yennefer. Who would have thought?
Get to the point.
An Nilfgaardian scout from the local garrison saw her.
Where?
At their camp. She rode in there. Dark of night. Black and white. Gooseberries and... Yes, I know. Had a terse exchange with the garrison commander and raced off.
Where to?
I'm not omniscient. Ask at the garrison.
Thanks.
We men of the road must stick together. Perhaps one day I'll be in trouble and you'll be nearby to help.
Don't worry about it, he's just a vagrant, formerly a merchant. You can forget about him, he's not an important person whatsoever. Don't worry about it. So you leave the tavern, but before being able to check the new lead you just got from Gaunter O'Dim, the locals decide to give you a very warm welcome. And after beating them to within an inch of their life, you mount Roach and the game lets go of the reins and sets you loose on the open world. You can either follow the main quest marker to progress the main story, go to the nearby notice board which contains everything from side quests, points of interest, and even small pieces of information about the town and the lives of the people living in it, or go and explore the open world at your leisure. Following the main quest in search of Yen, you make your way to the Nilfgaardian encampment where you get your very next quest. This man's name is Peter.
Look at my hands. Look, see the calluses? These are not the hands of an excellency, but of a farmer. So we speak peasant to peasant. How much can you give?
40 bushels. There'd be more, sir, but our lads, the Temerians that is, took from us earlier and...
You will give 30, and that will do. Let us settle on it, and I wish to see the transport soon.
He is the captain of the Nilfgaardian camp and has information on the whereabouts of Yen. He is willing to divulge this information, but only after you successfully kill the griffin that is terrorizing the army and local population.
Tit for tat.
In order to do that, you first need to talk to 2 people. Tamira, a local herbalist who knows where the right herb to make griffin bait grows, and Mislav, a hunter who knows where a nearby attack on a Nilfgaardian patrol took place. This then leads you to the griffin's nest. After either gathering all the necessary information or just walking away and not even inspecting the corpse of the griffin's now ex-wife, you set out to kill said griffin. You set the trap, wait for the griffin to land, and after damaging it enough it will fly over to a second location where the fight continues, you kill it and take its head as proof of a successful kill. Now it should be noted that I've just skipped over a great deal of content and world building here, which really isn't fair to the game, so allow me to backtrack a little. White Orchard is a small part of the overall world, but I honestly think that the small size and very few things to do in it benefit it as a whole and make it way more memorable than most other parts of the game. For instance, remember the notice board? Right next to it there's a burnt down hut where you can help find the person that burned it down. With the help of your Witcher senses, you follow the tracks, find the arsonist and decide his fate. If you successfully track down the arsonist, the dwarf then acts as your smith for the area and you can even return to his hut in the epilogue to see it completely restored. You can come across the body of a spy who was, well, spying on a local bandit camp and find his notes detailing everything that went on in their camp and in turn go and loot the place for all of the trinkets and gold. Along the road to the Nilfgaardian encampment you can fight a wraith that is guarding a place of power. However, more importantly, after getting the wraith to half HP and seeing it teleport away, you can knock down the door of some small ruins and follow the stairs into the basement. There you will finish the job and stumble across a body of a fellow witcher of the Viper School and the body of a witch hunter. Now unless I am misremembering horribly, you can find a letter in a chest in a bandit camp somewhere that essentially explains that they sent the witcher into an ambush, lying to him about a monster underneath the ruins because they thought he was responsible for a murder somewhere around White Orchard, and even after they realized he wasn't the murderer, they just let the ambush play out. So the witch hunter ambushed and killed the Witcher, who then came back for revenge as a wraith, killing the man that ambushed him, and you stumbling upon this location basically means you ended his torment and let him into the afterlife. You can see through the lies of a merchant and accuse him of murder just to find out he's part of the Temerian resistance group trying to take away medicine from the warmongering Nilfgaardians and bring it back to his camp. Lena tried meeting with her boyfriend in the woods one night and was left horribly mutilated by the griffin on her way there. Her boyfriend is a Nilfgaardian soldier, a soldier of the army that has taken these lands for their own not even a few weeks ago. Clearly that is the reason they wanted to secretly meet in the woods out of view of everyone else. Also sex, and if you decide to help, the results of that won't be seen until hours later, and even then only if you explore and do side quests, same with the frying pan quest. You can find out all about the sad story of the devil by the well when you read the book next to where they were killed, and you can learn about what kind of horrific monster Mislav is just by talking to him.
I'm a freak. Sorry. I'd rather not talk about it. I'm a freak too.
Aye, but of another kind.
If it's lycanthropy, I can help.
What?
Lycanthropy. Werewolves. Handled a few cases in the past. It's usually a simple curse
The
that...
Lord's son, Florian, and I, we loved each other.
And to be completely honest, White Orchard is my second favorite part of the base game, even if it low-key serves as just an extended tutorial building on the things that you've learned in Kaer Morhen. Every single encounter in this place has a backstory to it. There is not a single poorly designed encounter anywhere in this area, and while none of the quests are all that difficult, complex, or intriguing, I don't really expect that at the start of the game. In short, White Orchard does a lot with a very little and is a fantastic first chapter to this game that also just so happens to have a great story structure underneath it all. It starts off slow, you arrive at a location that you know nothing about, the people there hate you, you can choose to help or ignore the people in need, but the ultimate goal is to find any and all information about the person you're after. During this search, you encounter many different types of enemies, meet different people, and just in general start to get a feeling for the world and its rules, and the chapter is completed with a climactic boss fight that ends it on a high note. Not bad for an elongated tutorial if I do say so myself. So you return to Peter with the confirmed kill, trade this for the information of Yen's whereabouts, which happens to be Vizima, a short ride from where you are now. With this information in hand, you rush back to the tavern where Vesemir is patiently waiting, and just as you arrive, the locals show their appreciation for all of your help around the village. After that bloodbath, a squad of Nilfgaardian soldiers awaits you outside, and instead of being reprimanded, you are awkwardly reunited with the very person you have been looking for this entire time.
Excuses, excuses. You've not changed a bit.
Don't get me wrong, Yennefer. I'm glad to see you. But I do think you owe us an explanation.
And I shall provide it. In Vizima. Ready your horses.
Intrigued by her proposal, you ride for Vizima, but not before getting attacked by the Wild Hunt.
Yennefer, how'd they...
We shall talk of this tomorrow, all right? After the audience.
The section in Vizima and your visit to the Emperor is short, however it is absolutely integral to the story and is therefore worth discussing, even if only in brief. You are bathed, shaved, and expected to be well behaved both when meeting the Emperor himself and when being questioned by a character that indeed exists in this game. Two quick notes by the way that I can't put anywhere else in the script. I love that the throne room in this game is nearly identical to the one in The Witcher 1, that is a lovely detail, and I would also like to give credit to one of the best voice acted characters in the entire game, Emperor Emhyr.
I had forgotten how insolent you can be. I haven't the time to convince you, nor the desire, in fact.
Even after I read it in the credits after my first full playthrough, and even when being consciously aware of the fact on all of my subsequent playthroughs, the actor manages to lose himself in the role so flawlessly that I often forget that I'm listening to Charles Dance.
You know, that's what you want people to think of you. When you hear them whispering Kingslayer behind your back, doesn't it bother you? Enough of this banter. You will agree regardless, if for no other reason than because I shall pay you more than you customarily receive for a contract. Considerably more. You will wed her, bed her, and put a child in her. Surely you're capable of that.
Seriously? Mr. Dance, I know you'll never see this video, but you did a phenomenal job. Swiftly moving forward, this is the part of the game where you are introduced to what the main story of the game is going to be for nearly the rest of the game. Ciri, Emhyr's daughter and your kind of adopted daughter that Geralt, I think, raised to be a Witcher in the books, but I'm not really sure how or why or when, it's never explained in the game. She's been sighted after years of absence. She has been sighted in Velen by a spy named Hendrik and on some remote rocks in the middle of the sea named Skellige, where a huge magical blast left a major part of a forest completely decimated. Seeing as how you and Yen are now a team, even though she still makes bitchy snide remarks at you occasionally.
One thing before we go. Why didn't you contact me? Didn't need me? Didn't even want to see me?
I didn't want to spoil things. I'd heard you and Triss made a great couple.
Yen, I'd lost my memory.
Really? That's your excuse?
Yeah, sorry love, I actually wanted to be with Shani, but the games didn't allow for that because despite this being an apparent trilogy of games, fuck all matters when jumping from one game to another. Everyone is different, nothing is the same. Insert random image of Thaler in here, editor. Thank you. Also, what about Birdie, Big Bust Miriam, Licking Lucy, Whistling Wendy, or my personal favorite, Arsleta? Or any of the dozens of other women I slept with, you ain't jealous of them? Just Triss? This is reverse Twilight for fuck's sake. Oh, also remember how I sacrificed myself for you, accepting to be a rider of the Wild Hunt, essentially almost dying in the process and developing an amnesia so severe that I remembered nothing for the better part of 2 entire games? Yeah, remember, right? Any particular reason you didn't come find me sooner in the first 2 games and try to help me regain my memories? You know, perhaps preventing me from unknowingly cheating on you?
I didn't want to spoil things.
So yeah, now you're a team and Yen decides to go to Skellige while you're tasked with checking the leads in Velen and Novigrad. Prior to leaving, you can ask this bloke to explain the way of the world. In short, this is the world of The Witcher as presented in the game. The war that is ravaging the lands has now slowed down yet is far from over. We are currently located somewhere around here in the area that used to be part of a free country called Temeria. However, not even a few weeks have passed since it was fully occupied by Nilfgaard. There used to be other free states and kingdoms such as Aedirn and Kaedwen, but after the ending of The Witcher 2, when Nilfgaard with Emperor Emhyr at the helm started their relentless push north, seizing anything in their way, the Redanians, led by this psychotic, racist prick of a man, took the opportunity to take the lands to their east, so now the map is essentially split in half. with Redania on the north and Nilfgaard in the south, with the last barrier preventing Nilfgaard from pushing onwards being the Pontar River, a river which we will be crossing a few times later in the game. If you want, you can learn more about the few specific regions of this world that you will be visiting later. For instance, Novigrad is a free city that is incredibly important due to its supply of ships and gold, so both sides are fighting for it. The fact that Skellige is a divided country more concerned with pillaging and internal wars than joining any side of the war, and that Velen is a shithole. Before leaving, however, you can play a round of Gwent, find a new letter, swords and armor set that has been added in the brand new patch, and also find this secret compartment with a few goodies hidden inside, and off to Velen to meet Hendrik we go. Nope, that isn't a joke, and fair warning, this isn't going to be easy to follow. But through the power of God, editing, and more importantly MS Paint, we will soldier through this important dump of information together and hopefully arrive at the end with a better understanding of everything the game has to offer. Your arrival in Velen is where the game opens up drastically. Not just in terms of the open world, but even how you wish to progress with the unfolding story. Even though you and Yen agreed that you will follow any and all leads in Velen first before eventually meeting up in Skellige, you can just ignore that and do basically whatever the fuck you want. That is enough for me to get a mild migraine just thinking about it. The intended progression of the game is as follows. You arrive at Velen and exhaust any and all leads you come across. These leads are located in villages, swamps, caves, a city, and after exhausting all of them you move on to Novigrad. Novigrad is such a large, meticulously crafted and detailed city with many things to do, quests to complete and people to meet that it easily deserves its own mention and later on even a detailed breakdown. After exhausting all the leads in Novigrad, you meet with a sailor who agrees to take you to the islands of Skellige for a small fee of 1,000 coins. There you meet Yen, you exhaust all the leads and clues in Skellige, which leads you straight back to Velen and then onto the parts which for now I will just call the endgame. It should be noted that in order to even get passage to the endgame, you must finish every main quest in the previous locations, even if it would technically make sense for you to go there without finishing a few of them. However, while this may be the intended way due to sections of the game being essentially locked behind not only a financial barrier but also a recommended level barrier, with a little creativity you can complete the first 3 parts in any order you wish. You can save up some coin, never exhaust any leads in Velen or Novigrad for that matter, and go straight to Skellige and even tell Yen you got no information because the game is ready for the player to try and approach it in this way.
I'm not done searching in Velen yet.
Thought you'd tend to that immediately.
Change of plans. Haven't looked around Novigrad yet.
As you can imagine, you acquire all the necessary information to find Ciri in a completely different way depending on which sections of the game you approach at what time. So while the conclusion will always be the same, the game reacts to the player's choices with a few different dialogue options and even slightly different cutscenes, depending on the order that you uncover the truth behind what happened. Now, I'll be completely honest, this doesn't really do much for me as a player. I love talking about it, I love bringing it up in discussions, and I have to acknowledge it in this critique because I feel like it is so ridiculously impressive. But at the end of the day, this feature doesn't actually add or subtract to my overall enjoyment of the game at all.
Bullshit.
Not because I don't like having choices in games or because I hate open world games that allow different ways of approaching its story. No, the reason behind my complete neutrality towards this feature and why I even think it might have been a huge waste of development time is way more complicated than that and requires us to take a deep dive into every single aspect of this game that is not the main story. Get ready because we are pausing the story in its tracks and are about to go in depth on every single aspect of the exploration, combat, reward system, side quests, and more, and why I think the game fails in keeping me engaged and making a compelling gameplay loop in every single one of these aspects. And of course, because talking about art can never be simple, all of the aforementioned aspects of this game are intertwined, have multiple layers and sub-layers underneath sub-layers, and therefore make me wish I never started looking at anything critically in my entire life. Let's go. No matter what you choose to do in this game, whether it's doing quests, getting lost in the world, or buying stuff at shops, you will have to travel. Either on foot, fast travel between predetermined locations called signposts, or most probably by horseback on your trusty steed Roach. Now first of all, Roach is a dumbass, let's make this absolutely clear. I love hating and hate loving this horse. We'll talk more about her later in the glitches section, but for now, no matter what your preferred way of arriving at a destination happens to be, chances are you will open the map, see a nearby undiscovered location, slap a marker on that baby and beeline in that direction. Speaking of the map, remember how nice and tidy and not overly populated with distractions the map of White Orchard was? Well, here is the map of Velen.
Holy Jesus! What is that? What the fuck is that?
Now this isn't necessarily a bad thing, even if it is just plain overwhelming. If the quality of encounters in this region is on par with the ones in White Orchard, then surely we have nothing to worry about, right?
I don't like where this is going.
Yeah, the quality just isn't there. While I will concede that most of these encounters do have some world building tied to it and basically always make sense and are integrated in the world flawlessly, that doesn't stop the fact that almost every single one of these encounters inevitably boils down to go to a place, kill everyone, gather loot, leave, rinse and repeat. Now firstly, you might be thinking that clearly just isn't true. Look right here on the map, there's like a dozen different types of encounters scattered throughout the hundreds of undiscovered locations. You have places of power, monster dens, abandoned sites, smugglers' caches, guarded treasures, bandit camps, people in distress, spoils of war, hidden treasures, monster nests and cave entrances, and yet most of them still boil down to that arrive, kill and plunder loop I described earlier. The only ones that do not follow this formula are places of power, which you arrive at, sit at, get an upgrade level and move on, and smugglers' caches, which are underwater loot containers that you dive down to and get the loot, which are usually still guarded by enemies you one-shot with your crossbow. Underwater. But I can think of a handful of instances where they aren't guarded, which is good enough for me to include them in this bracket. There's also a precedent to be made for certain guarded treasures and monster nests to be put in this bracket, seeing as how you can sometimes arrive at a guarded treasure and the enemy is either too far away to engage in combat or spawns after you take the treasure. And certain monster nests can be reached in the exact same way, but these always felt like glitches or the AI bugging out more than a deliberate design choice. So every other encounter, which by the way is the vast majority of encounters, boil down to arrive, kill, loot. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. My point is that I don't mind games that prioritize flashy action and combat over everything else. Give me different types of weapons to use, varied enemy design, different ways of approaching encounters, whether that's guns blazing, stealthy, or everything in between. Gadgets that aren't just used as alternative ways to damage enemies, encounters where my skills of planning, positioning, reflexes, adapting, or thinking on my toes will be put to the test. Using the environment to my advantage, and if you want to get into more of an RPG vibe, ways of escalating and de-escalating a situation without weapons, actual role-playing, lying, deceiving, bribing, etc, etc, etc. So does The Witcher 3 offer any of the aforementioned ways of approaching any given situation in a video game? Nope, here is how every encounter in this game goes. You ride to a location and no matter how you approach that location, enemies will attack you on sight. This means that any gameplay variety in the forms of stealth or role-playing are immediately thrown out the window. So every encounter, no matter the type of enemy, is a guns-blazing affair. I'll even throw out things such as using the environment to my advantage due to the fact that the only thing you can do in that regard is blow up explosive barrels, and occasionally either tunnel enemies down a narrow corridor, abuse their AI and go to a place where they can't reach you, or trap them in a corner, which doesn't even work, by the way. I'd bet. So how is the weapon variety in this game? One weapon variety. You have swords, and that's it. Even if you choose to hinder yourself and play with a different, in 99% of cases less viable and less damaging weapon such as the pickaxe, battle axe, mace or hammer, nothing apart from the damage you deal and the bonuses you get changes. Your moveset remains the same, the way you deal with enemy encounters remains the same, it's just a numbers game. The bigger the number, the better you are. However, enemies deal a lot of damage, especially on harder difficulties, so at least you have to be pretty dang careful and plan your approach. Is what I would say if the game didn't give me unlimited spammable dodges that provide iframes and have no discernible downsides, while also giving me a shield that blocks 100% of damage I take that I can use every couple of seconds, while also giving me 0 interesting enemies to fight. I can't stress this enough. Every single enemy in this game, no matter their number, size, or I don't know, ethnicity, is the exact same fight. Let me boil enemy encounters down for you. The vast majority of encounters in this game is essentially a loop. You walk up to an enemy and you hit said enemy 3 or 4 times. During these attacks, they are visibly stun-locked. They can't break out of the stun lock for a surprise attack or anything, however, after these 3 or 4 attacks, the enemy will do what I will refer to as a defensive maneuver. They either jump away, block with their wings, or push you to stun you, and when they do that, they always, and I mean always, follow up with an attack that you can just dodge to the side. Always. This attack therefore misses you, obviously, which then leads to you going back on the offensive where you attack the enemy 3 or 4 times, and if by some chance you're fighting an enemy that hasn't died by this point, they do a defensive maneuver, you dodge the follow-up attack, and you go back to hitting the enemy. This means that most combat encounters are just boring loops where it feels more like you're breaking the horrendous AI than having an interesting, challenging, or fun fight. And to be fair to the game, for better and worse, it does have some enemies that break out of this 3 or 4 hit loop. On the better side, fiends, while still being able to loop them pretty easily, at least require a different loop due to the fact that when you attack them, they give almost no warning for when they're either stun-locked or not stun-locked. I found the easiest way to loop them to be one strong attack, dodge to the side, rinse and repeat. Most enemies that can fly will take to the skies, and while this just leads to boring downtime with nothing interesting happening, it is at least something. And for the best example of what I'm trying to show, Foglets either do a follow-up attack like most other enemies after being stun-locked, or they go invisible, leaving you in a state where you actually have to react to them attacking out of invisibility. You never know for how long exactly they'll be invisible, so you constantly have to be on your toes, and the attack out of invisibility comes out so quickly that the best way of dodging it that I found was to actually look for the first signs of them coming out of invisibility and dodging on that cue instead of reacting to the hit itself. And when it comes to the worst parts of enemies breaking out of this loop in a different way, Leshen go invisible and teleport to a different location which damages you for some reason. I don't understand. What? However, the loud cawing of the birds and them flying exactly to where the Leshen will reappear always makes it so that you will literally be attacking it before it even has a chance to respawn properly. Essentially, it's still a 3 to 4 hit loop, just with the enemy not even getting a chance to hit you back. And even when it does hit you, it's not from an actual visible attack, the game just decides you should take damage for some reason. And for the worst example of enemies breaking out of this shitty 4-hit loop, I'm just gonna let this play out and say absolutely nothing. And that clip perfectly exemplifies exactly what my biggest issue with this game is. I am facing an opponent that clearly can't do anything. He just sits there and lets me quick attack him from 100 to 0. And yet, because the game uses a completely broken system where enemy HP and their damage dealt gets exponentially higher and higher the bigger the difference between your level and the level of your enemy, you come across these situations where killing a random enemy can take minutes, but other times big climactic fights that are hyped up just drop in 3 seconds flat. And this problem of boring, samey and frustrating enemy encounters is so noticeable because, again, this is the entire game, down to even the final boss fight. There are almost no enemies that deviate from this loop, making it seem like some random guy you fight in an alley and the literal final boss of the game are one and the same. And this loop is only made worse due to the inclusion of Witcher signs and certain unlockable abilities. Whenever you level up in this game, or whenever you find and sit at a place of power, you get an ability point. This can be used to unlock a certain ability in either the combat, signs, alchemy, or general ability tree. This ability then also needs to be assigned if you want its benefits and can usually be upgraded a couple of times, and certain abilities are locked behind how many points you used in previous levels of the branch. Essentially, it's a skill tree, y'all. You've seen these, you know what I'm talking about. Now let's get the usual critiques out of the way because I have way bigger problems with how this feature is implemented. For starters, the unlocks are boring. These abilities are very rarely anything that would change your playstyle in any meaningful way, and even the few that are, I just find them to be borderline unusable. On the boring side, you have around 75 to 80% of these abilities. Quick attacks do 10% more damage, strong attacks do 10% more damage, increased chance and damage of a critical hit with quick attacks, increased chance and damage of critical hits with strong attacks. More damage with the crossbow, increased range, damage or damage threshold of your signs. Art now deals 40 damage instead of 0. Potions and bombs now deal more damage or inflict poison. More inventory space, more armor. You get the idea. I don't think I need to go in depth when it comes to these abilities. The best thing I can say about them is that they do provide some tangible and sometimes even powerful ways of making Geralt stronger. They're still boring though and change nothing when it comes to how you play the game for the most part. They're just number tweaks to damage and resistances. And whenever the game decides to switch things up and give you some interesting new ways of approaching combat, they almost work and are almost interesting. Whirl might be the most interesting and fun of these abilities to use purely because it changes your combat stance completely. You are no longer just soft-locked onto one enemy. Nope, you turn into a goddamn professional ballet dancer with Geralt essentially doing AoE damage around him. It isn't consistent at all, it's not even that much stronger than just focusing down one enemy at a time in my opinion, but man, do I feel like a boss when using this ability, so Whirl is a-okay with me. Giving Geralt alternate sign casting on the other hand, for instance changing Igni from a cone-shaped blast into a mini flamethrower, Quen from a shield that blocks damage to a sphere that blocks damage and even heals you, seems like a nice idea at first, but one that rarely if ever works, and here's why. Most of the abilities and ability upgrades in the upgrade tree have this weird 0 or 1 mentality when it comes to their design. They are either completely useless with the exception of 1 or 2 enemies that these abilities directly counter, or they are the most brokenly overpowered abilities I have used in a game in my life. Quen is a magical shield that just directly blocks one enemy attack outright. It doesn't matter what level the enemy is or how much damage that attack should have done, that attack deals 0 damage. Oh, is that an enemy whose level is so high I don't even see the level, just a red skull indicating death? Doesn't matter. That attack should have one-shot me? Nope, 0 damage. Why? 'Cause fuck you, that's why. This is an ability implemented into a game where you already have unlimited spammable dodges that you can upgrade even further, by the way. A game with an unlock in the general skill tree that makes food and water give you passive health regeneration for 20 real-life minutes. So even if you somehow find yourself in a bad situation, that piece of moldy bread you ate 18 minutes ago will top your HP off real nice and quick. And to top it all off, even without upgrades or potions to boost it, a game where your stamina, you know, the thing you need to cast abilities, regenerates from 0 to 100 faster than most enemies that you fight one-on-one can even attack. I'm not joking, even if you manage to get hit by an enemy, which most of the time won't even be your fault, by the way, we'll talk about that in the hitbox section of this discussion, you are either set to use another Quen shield or like 3/4 of the way there and just need to wait for a few seconds during which you can just spam your overpowered dodge. This makes it really difficult for you, the player, to even get hit, let alone feel any tension during these fights. Fights where you, however, will feel tension even into the late game, however, revolve around groups of enemies. I would say a good portion of encounters in this game revolves around the enemies outnumbering you. These are far and away the most difficult encounters in this game. Wolves, drowners, people, neckers, anything that is usually smaller in size than Geralt comes in a group. And the weird part is that just because they're smaller doesn't mean they deal any less damage than even much bigger enemies. So while you can fight a griffin or a basilisk or a troll one-on-one even when it's way over-leveled compared to you and never even get hit, in these group fights the chances of you getting hit get much higher. And with enemies dealing these same incredible amounts of damage, you can imagine why these are the fights that are the only ones that have any semblance of tension or difficulty. While Quen still works in these fights and can even stun enemies around you when they destroy it, it isn't really perfect for a situation where you're surrounded by 5 enemies, each of them being able to kill you in a few hits. That's where Igni comes in. A cone-based fire attack that damages and burns enemies, leaving them immobilized. Now, while still really strong, Igni isn't even nearly as ridiculous as Quen, however, with enough levels put into its hit chance and sign intensity, you can easily burn most enemies when you're outnumbered. You clump them together, hit them with Igni, which leaves them flailing around for about 6 seconds, which gives you plenty of time to take out the enemies that are not burning and return to kill the incapacitated ones later. The other 3 signs are as follows. Ard. Ard exists to do something. It is a cone-based force push that can, like, knock down smaller opponents, which leaves them vulnerable to a finisher. When the finisher decides to work, you know, instead of just like hitting the enemy 4 times until it dies, its alternate casting changes it to a dome surrounding Geralt that knocks down enemies even harder. It is also used outside of combat to knock down already broken doors. Yrden, which is only useful when fighting noon raids and night raids, they need to stand within its radius in order for you to be able to hit them unless you craft the bomb that completely counters them, which now makes the sign basically useless. And I say that because Yrden's secondary effect, the part where it slows down the movement of enemies standing in its radius, just makes it way more difficult for me to properly time dodges for some reason, and Axii makes enemies that have a shield drop said shield and lets you one-shot them. Sometimes. Most of the time. I don't know, it doesn't work all the time, but most of the time it does. Outside of combat, you can also use it as a Star Wars Jedi persuasion ability.
Think you need to leave now.
Do we?
You do.
Well, let's go then.
You know, whenever the developers even remembered to add it as an option. So in short, Quen is just broken. It is the single strongest ability I have used in my life, and even if the alternate casting where you make this giant dome around you that can even heal you is somehow even stronger or even on par with basic Quen, the fact that it limits my movement and I just kinda have to stand there and wait makes the alternate casting version feel way worse to use in my opinion, so I never use it. Same with art, by the way. If you find it fun to stand still for a few seconds and then walk up to an enemy and hit one button and kill them, hey, more power to you. I myself, however, find this somehow even more boring than the usual combat loop. Yrden's alternate cast, where it acts as a projectile catcher, is somehow even more of a joke and even more limited than the regular Yrden cast. Flamethrower Igni is actually stronger than regular Igni because of how easy it is to proc burning on enemies, but again, the way it limits my field of view and movement is enough to never make me want to use it. And weirdly enough, and I know people are going to disagree, alternate casting Axii, where it turns up to 2 enemies into your allies for a short duration, is incredibly good. However, it is most useful in situations where you're outnumbered. You know, the only combat situations in which I find any semblance of joy or difficulty. So whenever I use it in these situations, it just feels like I am sucking the last atoms of enjoyability out of this combat system, so again, I never use it. Which leads us to alchemy. My main issue with the alchemy system in this game is that in order to have anything resembling a good alchemy build, you must do the following. Recognize the enemy that you are fighting. Check if you have the oil or bomb that will help you with said enemy already crafted. If you don't, check if you have the proper formulae to craft the oil. If you don't have that, go out into the open world and either explore and hope you find the formulae, or buy it off a vendor if you can even find the right one without a guide. When you get the formulae, do you have the ingredients necessary? If not, either buy them or find them in the open world. And congratulations, after all these steps, all the time and possibly in-game money you have now spent, you can craft something that barely makes a difference, has limited charges that you can refill by resting, wasting even more of your time and some alcohol, and something that is never even remotely as useful as Quen or Igni. Oh, and if the enemy that you're fighting is a high enough level to where you need a ridiculous amount of time and hits to kill it, nothing in the alchemy tab will lower the enemy's level or anything. It just gives you a percentage boost to your damage. So damage sponge enemies are still damage sponge enemies that now need 100 hits instead of 150 hits to kill. And the worst part about all of this is that the way the game is balanced, alchemy could be a very useful part in the early game. In the early game of The Witcher 3, you deal less damage to enemies and take more damage from enemies than in later game scenarios. To most people, this might seem logical, however, if I change the wording of the same argument to say, as a level 1 Witcher, you need 8 hits to kill a level 1 enemy and they need 4 hits to kill you, however, as a level 20 Witcher, you only need 4 hits to kill the same level 20 enemy and they need 8 hits to kill you, this now becomes way more of a complicated subject to talk about. There are enemies in the early game of The Witcher 3 that you just cannot kill unless you craft the right bombs or oils. Werewolves, when taken below what feels like 20% HP, start regenerating health. this regeneration never stops, which makes it such a well-balanced and completely not infuriating part of the game, especially when you can fight one of them when following the main quest in Velen, and another in what is essentially the first Witcher contract you will probably find. In the earlier levels, up to about I would say level 7 or 8, if you come across a werewolf and don't have anything crafted that would help you with its regeneration, there is literally nothing you can do. These fuckers regenerate HP faster than you can dish out damage, and I want to repeat this again, the regeneration never stops. The fact that I danced around a werewolf for literally 8 minutes and it never stopped regenerating is enough for me to conclude that even if it does stop regenerating at some point, that the time for that is way too long for any person to just wait out. However, you can come across several werewolves throughout your journey, and yet the later into the journey you are, the easier they become to kill even without any alchemy. So that graph I showed like half an hour ago of the difficulty of this game, while not entirely accurate, still gets my point across. There is a point at around level 15 where you just out of nowhere become overpowered, no matter what difficulty setting you are on or what abilities you're leveling up. Your swords will start dealing insane damage, the armor you have will block enough damage that you will outtrade essentially any enemy, and more importantly, no health regenerating effect that a werewolf can bring will be strong enough for you not to just slice through like it's butter. Now I want you to think back on how many steps you not only need to even make a goddamn bomb in this game, but also to even get the formulae necessary to even be able to craft it. The further you progress in this game, the more you explore, the more formulae you will acquire, the more gold you will have for both the resources and the formulae if you want to buy them, and yet the lesser your need for alchemy will be. So in the early game, when all of these oils and bombs and decoctions would be incredibly useful and in some cases are even absolutely necessary, the chances of you having all of the necessary parts to craft them are incredibly slim. But as the game progresses, you get more and more formulae, your inventory becomes filled with dozens upon dozens of alchemical substances and crafting materials, which unfortunately you will never need because you will just outscale enemies. So you take this boring combat system with essentially the depth of a puddle where enemies can barely hurt you, where there is no room for player expression, where certain things that you can level up are ridiculously strong while others are so bad or only good in such specific scenarios that you never want to use them. And you top it off with the reward system of this game. I'm not even going to go in depth about the quest rewards of some of the quests in this game. You can go through a multi-stage quest where you have to meet a person at the right place at the right time and be a much higher level than when you get the quest, and then kill people and barter with people and do protection and so much random shit, just for the reward to be a dogshit sword that he always promises is the best sword ever that you will just sell back to him immediately. I'm not even gonna talk about all of these similar instances, even though I really don't think it's that difficult to program a system where the game checks your gear at the end of quests or when looting, and gives you gear that is at least on the same level as your current gear. The bigger problem I have is that if the only thing people need in a video game reward system in order to call it good is for you to clear a camp of enemies, open a chest, take out some gold which is useless and by the end of the game everyone will have tens of thousands of just sitting there, some crafting materials that most people will never use, and maybe get a new sword or a piece of armor where the only important stat is that stupid damage or armor rating, then Jesus fuck, I am so sorry to every developer that puts the most minuscule amount of effort into their reward system. Just know that there are people out there that appreciate you. Because when I say that these shitty ratings right here are the only things that really matter despite certain pieces of equipment having up to like 7 additional bonuses, I really mean it. What I'm about to show you is footage of my level 50 completely endgame, beat both DLCs and brought equipment straight out of said DLCs Geralt. In this footage you will see me Igni level 3 or 4 drowners. I am over 45 levels higher than these enemies, my only primarily offensive sign barely one-shot an enemy that is incredibly weak to it, and my basic quick attack dealt about the same amount of damage. Now let's take a look at this exact same scenario but against a bunch of human enemies. This must mean I'm using a build where I put everything or at least a good chunk of my ability points into the combat skill tree, right? Fucking psych. I cannot, for the life of me, unless I min-max the ever-living fuck out of this character or go to New Game Plus or farm stuff, make a more magic-inclined Geralt if my life depended on it. I have all these sign intensity, stamina regeneration, Igni boosting bullshit I can put on him. Look, even one of my swords gives Igni a boost and none of the pieces of armor give any types of bonuses towards my attack damage, and yet all of this isn't enough for Igni to be as strong as a basic light attack in any scenario where the enemy isn't specifically weak to it. And just in case you don't believe me, go on YouTube to any build that is optimized to the point of them getting upwards of 600% sign intensity. Then watch them use and spam Igni or any sign for that matter as much as possible and then proceed to quick or strong attack an enemy just for the sword attack to deal more damage than any of the signs. I find this absolutely hilarious. No shade to any of the video makers, by the way, they did a fantastic job explaining their builds and why exactly they use what they used and why their builds are some of the best for sign usage. I'm just noting how clearly useless anything aside from sword damage rating and armor defense rating is. I really want this point to be as clear as possible. Imagine you make a character in an actual RPG and you put everything into their summoning stat, for example. You learn all these dozens of abilities, you can combo them, boost yourself to do more damage, have equipment that is solely dedicated to boosting the abilities and damage type of your choice. And then you walk up to an enemy with the same character and hit them once with a basic light attack, and that light attack deals the same amount or even more damage compared to the abilities you're proficient at. That is The Witcher 3's combat and reward system in a nutshell. And that is what makes them have absolutely no depth or replay value to me. Leveling up the combat skill tree in this game just makes me feel like I'm taping 50 Black Ops RCXD killstreaks onto the side of a nuclear bomb. It's complete overkill. You are boosting something that is already the only consistently effective and satisfying way of dealing damage just to deal slightly more damage. Alchemy still makes no sense to level up, and I will have nobody tell me otherwise, same with the general ability tree. Notable, incredibly overpowered, what the fuck were you thinking? This makes alchemy even less viable, exceptions excluded. And then you're left with signs, where with every upgrade you get more sign intensity and stamina regeneration while in combat, which makes you deal more damage and have a higher chance of hitting the enemy, while also being able to spam Quen even more than you already were, and there we go. The only skill tree worth investing in so you can spam signs quicker and not pray to RNGesus as much for the Igni proc. But at the end of the day, it's all in service so that you can have an easier time quick attacking enemies to death. And that's the problem. There are so many different facets of this game's combat that just feel like add-ons instead of actual interesting and strong routes that change your build in any meaningful way. Oh, you wanna make a cool crossbow build? I mean, there's an upgrade path right there, specifically tailored around it. Well, too bad, because the crossbow does essentially 0 damage, making it completely useless in regular combat. But then when you use it underwater or when steering a boat, then it one-shots every enemy for some reason, even when you don't put a single level of upgrade into it. Seriously, that is your only way of defeating these enemies, firing a crossbow underwater or when steering a boat. That is somehow stronger than when you use it like, oh you know, an actual crossbow? And hey, wanna see how much fun it is to snipe a flying enemy with it? Yeah, you can snipe a griffin from midair if it is specifically going straight towards you. So this means you have to wait for whatever you're fighting to stop flying in circles doing nothing, and then when it decides to finally attack you, quickly press the middle mouse button to shoot it down from the air before it reaches you. It is essentially a glorified QuickTime event. However, if in this scenario after shooting the fucker down you don't just wait there and essentially stand still for the next couple of seconds reloading your crossbow, you won't reload it, meaning the next time you're in the exact same scenario you won't have the crossbow ready to shoot. This would be fine if there were any visual clues that the crossbow is empty, or if Geralt then just proceeded to reload, or if you had a designated reload button. But there aren't, he doesn't, and you don't. Geralt not only raises the crossbow, acts surprised that there is no bolt cocked and ready, and then reloads, but after the reload he just automatically shoots again and proceeds to reload again. This is genuinely like a 4-second loop when you need the crossbow to fire immediately. Luckily you can at least dodge out of it, but be careful not to dodge a few frames too quickly before Geralt finishes his reload, or you'll have to do that all over again. And I know you can ard enemies and sometimes even axie them, but by doing that we just make the crossbow even more worthless, further proving my point about how you shouldn't upgrade anything aside from signs. I hope that clarifies things, but please do not let this extensive clarification of every single tiny detail of The Witcher 3's combat system distract you from the fact that in 1998 The Undertaker threw Mankind off Hell in a Cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. And you guys want to know the worst thing about all of this? I'm not even done, because this fucking combat system has one last horrible flaw that I have yet to reveal. That flaw being that after hundreds of hours in this game, thousands of enemy encounters, hundreds of my own deaths, probably tens of thousands of enemies killed and much more, I have no fucking clue what kind of combat system this game even uses. Okay, so let's start off slow. There are attacks in this game that genuinely have great hitboxes. Arrows will miss you by millimeters and actually not hit you. I mean, look at that. If that ain't hitbox porn, I don't know what is. Sorry for the choppy frame rate and the fact that I open a menu just as this happens, but this spear misses me by not even the hairs on my back, and it actually misses. Now this spear hitbox is preceded by a different spear hitbox that also should have missed but didn't. And that's the point. None of the following attacks should hit me. Seriously, I have so much footage of these horrendous hitboxes just sitting on my external hard drive, it's a joke. Look at that. I can fit the entirety of Texas between me and the enemy's attack and it still fucking hits. And it even works the other way around. Enemies will be long gone by the time I attack and I will still hit them. Most of the time this results in 0 damage, but just the fact that I get a hit or get hit in any of these clips is a joke. So the next logical thing to do is completely shift my way of seeing this combat system. Clearly arrows are hitbox based, or they would have hit me in these scenarios, but maybe other enemy attacks aren't hitbox based. Maybe these attacks are just visually confusing, where the enemy does an attack, but instead of the arm being the source of damage is an invisible cone or AoE on the floor. But then even that isn't consistent. Enemies will attack right over my head with me not dodging and miss. That spear, which I have to show again, is just a magnificent hitbox. There are probably other attacks that I can show that should have hit, but didn't. At least if the combat system used here is an AoE based one. And then there's stuff that just plain doesn't make sense. A Leshen will teleport away from me and this will hit me. Next time it'll do the same, it won't hit me. Then a different time it will not only hit me, but by some random act of God I'll get hit by a bunch of birds. Igni is one of my favorite signs to use because it is incredibly practical and really strong against groups of smaller enemies. Most of the time it works just fine, but sometimes the game just decides that it's gonna hit an enemy so far away with it that it makes literally no sense. Some of these are understandable even if they still look and feel off, while others make absolutely no sense. A blast of Igni hits a person about 15 meters away. Sometimes it hits an enemy behind me or to the side of me. How can a hitbox of an ability that goes out just a few meters be this bad and inconsistent? But then you put in clips like this one where a griffin lunges at me and on the frame it hits me, there's still a good couple of meters of distance between us. Or how about this clip where I play a Ciri and I just straight up give up on trying to fathom what is even happening. The first attack hits me while in the middle of a dodge. I think I genuinely dodged this attack pretty much spot on, at least timing wise, yet it still hits me. The second attack I actually dodge poorly. Not only do I mistime the dodge, but I also dodge in the same direction to where the wing is going, meaning I should technically be in the firing line of the attack for longer, and yet it misses. The third attack seems like a legit hit, but when I slow the footage down, the enemy hits me in the middle of my dodge, which again, I do not understand how I could have timed this more perfectly. And just in case someone wants to say that you're not supposed to time these dodges correctly, just get out of the way of the attack in time. The fourth attack, I dodged so far behind the basilisk, there is no way that any humanly known combat system should register a hit, and yet it does. Like seriously, take a look at that again just in real time and tell me what's going on. There are AoE attacks done by enemies that are visualized, and I can see with my eyes that not only did these attacks hit the exact same frame they start despite the visuals showing them to be a slow-moving wave, but to make it even worse, I'm not even in the goddamn radius of the attack's visuals. It's a joke, what's going on? This isn't even mentioning attacks that aren't really attacks that for some reason hit me, or enemies just skipping entire animations to hit me, or the wind-up of certain attacks actually dealing damage when it has absolutely no right to. And to not harp on this point for too long, I would like to end this part with one last clip of me fighting a wraith. Hello? What? The frame before this fucker even hits me, I am so far away from its weapon that I can literally go into MS Paint, copy and paste the same weapon right next to it in order to double its length, multiple times by the way, and it still shouldn't have hit me, and yet it does. Told you I would use MS Paint, but you didn't believe me now, did ya? I have got no idea what's going on in this combat system. Enemies just do whatever the fuck they want half of the time, to the point that whenever I see any semblance of a good hitbox, I just think it's a fluke on the game side. Shit like this hits me, but a fiend puts its entire antlers through me like I'm a fucking Rajnich, and yet nothing happens. Remember to leave a comment in the comment section below if you know what a Rajnich is and what your favorite type of Rajnich is. Essentially, the too long don't give a fuck version of this is as follows. I don't know what the fuck is going on. I want to know what the fuck is going on, but god fucking damn it, can I not use any amount of game knowledge, logic, or intuition to get to the bottom of this? These are either some of the worst and most inconsistent hitboxes known to man, some of the most inconsistent AoEs imaginable, or if for some reason the game uses a system where it like, I don't know, just checks if attack animation equals true and Geralt's sweet succulent nips being kinda close but not really equals true, then deal damage? That still doesn't excuse the game from the fact that it makes absolutely no sense. So we have finally gotten past the combat, open world, and reward system of this game. Just as a quick refresher, combat bad. Open world beautiful with a lot of care put into random small things but with nothing interesting to find or do in it. Reward system bad. Big number goes up, coins are used for nothing, and crafting and alchemy exist. Onwards to the side quests. Side quests in this game can be boiled down as follows. Side quests that are directly linked to the main quests or the main characters of the story. These are usually great and we'll talk about them more when we talk about the main quests and story. Random quests you find in the world. These are always fun distractions, though the quality and depth of these does vary drastically. Most of the times they are pretty good quests that if nothing else further engross you in the world. And then there are the others. We'll take a look at the random world quests first. Finding a village full of piggies that, as it turns out, are cursed people, saving a woman from being burned alive in her home, killing Red Riding Hood. Most of these are the usual CD Projekt Red good that is completely seamlessly integrated with the open world. They usually end up with you, the player, having to make a decision that completely changes how the quest finishes. Now, not all of these are all that great, and sadly, because of the lackluster combat and the fact that many of the quests have a generic good option and a generic bad option, many of them just kind of blend in with one another for me. There are also just poorly paced quests, like that piggy quest I mentioned earlier. You arrive at a village full of pigs that turn out to be cursed people. The idea behind this quest is so cool, by the way. But then all you do is you look around the village, follow some clues to a nearby cave, find the source of the curse in said cave, go back to the village that you just came from, and very slowly herd the piggies to the cave that you just came from. With only a few lackluster combat sections to break the monotony of just running or walking back and forth and then choosing generic good option or generic bad option. Some of these quests have a tendency to just fail for some reason. Take the quest where an old lady asks you to pick up 3 statues dedicated to the gods scattered throughout the open world. You pick up the first 2 easy peasy, then arrive at the last one just to find it being vandalized right as you arrive. You talk to the people there who turn out to be scholars and proceed to make a pretty passionate defense of their beliefs and why they are doing what they are doing. Essentially, they're atheists who believe that religion is poisoning the minds of people. Choosing to do nothing and letting them continue to vandalize leads you to failing the quest with no rewards. On the other hand, choosing to do something leads you to murdering 3 people because they vandalized a few statues. Kind of extreme, especially on the murder front, but this isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it almost makes sense as to why you failed the quest. You took the quest from the old lady, so not doing what she asked of you could make sense as to why you failed the quest. If it wasn't for like the dozens of other quests that are designed in the exact same way, where you can return empty-handed because your morals got the better of you, and you still succeed in your quests and sometimes even get the reward. So these few exceptions where you actually fail a quest feel really out of place, but overall I do still at least enjoy the vast majority of these quests. And then there are the other quests. Gwent, contracts, treasure and scavenger hunts, horse racing and boxing matches. in that descending order of quality. First off, Gwent. You already know if you like or dislike this game. As someone who used to have a giant collection of Yu-Gi-Oh cards when he was like 10 years old, so 3 weeks ago, I enjoy this game. I'm not going to go into the rules of Gwent, cause let's be honest, it doesn't really matter and this video is long enough as is, so let me just say this. I hate that there are no shops in the entire game dedicated to selling these cards, yet they are the most popular thing ever. I don't hate that essentially the only way to acquire these cards, apart from a few that you can find in the open world, is to beat other players at Gwent and get a card from them as a reward. I do, however, hate that in order to collect them all, you need to beat every single merchant, banker, hairdresser, and blacksmith in the game. And I hate that there is a quest in the Blood and Wine DLC where one of the reward options is a bunch of Gwent cards that doesn't just check which cards you're missing and then gives those to you, rather it gives you a bunch of cards you already probably have, so then the reward for that quest is literally nothing. So essentially, Gwent is alright as a one-off thing and even serves as brief respite from the rest of the game and its dour, depressing mood. However, I had to mention that there are things, especially with how you collect these cards, that could have been done way better. Contracts. A person puts out a notice, usually on a notice board. On said notice, they detail a monster that needs to be taken care of. After visiting the person, they give you a bit more information on the location and sometimes even type of monster. You can then haggle for the price, hopefully getting a few more coins that you will never ever use for anything in this game, and set off to kill the monster. After killing it, you return and collect your reward. That's it. It is actually ridiculous how front-loaded this game is with the interesting and well-designed contracts, and how as the game goes on, at their best they just become boring quests with nothing to them, and at their worst, just downright infuriating with how many leaps in logic you have to make to not have your immersion completely ruined by them.
Your Hyperion Phantom was a hound of the Wild Hunt.
Eternal fire! Hounds run with the Wild Hunt as well. About 2 weeks back, I woke suddenly in the night, saw the hunt streaking across the sky.
You're a fucking idiot.
Treasure hunts are quests where you hunt for treasure by finding a letter detailing the location of some lost goods, usually just a few meters away from where you found the letter, and then you take the goodies. And the goodies are always gold, crafting ingredients, or pieces of equipment with hopefully a slightly higher rating than your current equipment. Have I mentioned how much I hate this game's reward system, by the way? And then there's scavenger hunts, where you find blueprints for legendary pieces of armor and swords that you then have to craft at a blacksmith that are almost never worth the hassle. Like, think about it, no matter how strong some of these sets are, and trust me, some of them are downright broken, it doesn't change the fact that when you start to understand how combat and enemies work in this game and how easy it is to abuse the AI, that most of these armor sets and their bonuses don't really matter. Mix that in with the fact that these blueprints are usually scattered throughout the open world, requiring a good deal of time to acquire, and that if you want the best possible bonuses you can't swap out any of these parts, and even the fact that most of these bonuses are again just plain boring and don't make a smidge of difference. What's the point in being able to cast 2 signs in a row when you almost never get ambushed in this game? You see enemies from a mile off and stamina regenerates 100 times faster outside of combat. You can already use Quen right before going into combat, have your stamina regenerate in a second, and then use Igni or just hold that stamina for another Quen use. What's the point in having an armor set that essentially blocks 75% of all types of damage when the difficulty of this game plummets into the negatives after about level 15, and the armor has a level requirement of 20? Not to mention that even unupgraded Quen and unlimited dodging are so broken that essentially nothing in the base game can hit you, so the developers had to make enemies that just downright bypass Quen in the DLC to even make it so that the game has a semblance of challenge or difficulty. Oh, also, every time you want to upgrade these sets, you have to go out into the open world, find blueprints for upgraded versions of the gear, and then craft the gear again. It's just a huge time waste for almost no reward. Do I mind that this is in the game? No, because it is far away and never gets in the way of the good quests, but it also doesn't add anything to the game, so why waste time on it? And speaking of time wastes, horse racing and boxing. When it comes to horse racing, the rules are simple. Does Roach have a saddle that gives her enough stamina to where you can just sprint from the beginning of the race to the end? Congratulations, you won the race. Does Roach not have a good enough saddle for that? Welp, just stop sprinting, park yourself diagonally on the racing line so nobody can go past you, wait for Roach's stamina to regenerate and win the race. Apart from the first race where you need to dodge a barrel and I believe one other race in the middle somewhere, there is nothing more to these races. The game even goes all slow motion during the barrel part to even give you a chance at dodging it, but my main point is that these races don't require any skill or planning or anything. You are just plopped into the race with no concept of what hurdles to expect, what the race length is, how much stamina you would even need to be able to win the race without having to stop. It is so bizarre. If at least the races got progressively harder with the number of races you win, but they don't. You can literally win like 4 races back to back, each getting progressively longer and hence more difficult, and then arrive at Skellige 15 hours later, where there is a race that is literally just a 15-second dash in a straight line. Again, it makes no sense. And speaking of making no sense, ladies and gentlemen, let me explain to you how to box in this game. There are 3 levels of boxing in this game. Level 1. There we go, that's it. Now, when you manage to beat a couple of level 1 boxers, in come the level 2 boxers, where they parry your attack, aka they do a defensive maneuver, you dodge to the side and start hitting them again and loop them until they die. Remind you of anything? And level 3, the most unfair thing I have seen in any video game ever, and I've seen the Bed of Chaos ballsack so many times that you can't even imagine. And no amount of people telling me that this guy is a Fight Club reference will change the fact that this is complete bullshit. Out of nowhere, out of thin fucking air, this game unironically decides to put you against enemies that attack so quickly that most people can't even physically react to their hits. I am not joking, most of these hits, when I judge them in favor of the game and look at the most minuscule of movements from the enemy's side, still take only around 1/5 of a second, around 175 to 200 milliseconds. Keep in mind that this is me being generous towards the game, you could easily say they attack even a bit quicker than that. Meanwhile, the average human reaction time to visual stimulus is about 200 to 300 milliseconds. Now granted, this number varies from source to source, though every video and article I read on the topic usually agrees with these numbers. According to data on the site humanbenchmark.com, the average person needs about 273 milliseconds to react to a giant red rectangle turning green. That is slower than The Witcher 3 that wants you to react to the most minuscule of movements. And let's even say that these numbers are wrong and you can react to these attacks, which, alright, I personally can, and not consistently mind you, but I can. This still doesn't change the fact that the minigame feels completely broken. When you box enemies on terrain that has an incline, I find it way easier to parry them if I have the advantage of the high ground, while if the enemy has the height advantage, I find that most attacks become impossible to parry. I don't understand if the parry window gets smaller here or if the enemy's attacks go over the parry animation. Something weird is happening here. An enemy 20 levels lower than me beats me in just 3 to 5 hits with the same quick attacks that are supposedly too fast for a good chunk of people to even react to them. Going on the offensive against these enemies is also a horrible idea, by the way. If they parry you, their quick attack comes out so quickly that Geralt doesn't even get out of his dazed state before the enemy hits you, meaning the enemy just gets a free hit on you. I just cannot for the life of me believe that someone playtested this and thought it was okay. Boot up your version of the game, go stand in front of Durden the Tailor or any later enemy that attacks this quickly and try to parry their attacks, and you will see for yourself how broken and buggy this minigame is. Which, by the way, is a perfect segue for me to talk about how glitchy this game is. Listen, if I wanted to, I could put every single glitch that I found annoying enough to ruin immersion in this game into a timeline, let that play out, and the video would be 3 to 4 hours longer. For context, I have around 1200 15-second long clips of the game acting up in some ridiculous way. Yet, in the interest of time and keeping this video as concise as possible, I have decided to dedicate a maximum of 10 to 15 minutes to this part of the video. The only purely mathematical thing you need to know here is that if we look at the number of clips I have available, with some of them even having multiple glitches, bugs, or oddities in them, is that we arrive at about 1200 glitches per 125 hours of gameplay. You can say that some of these aren't big enough to warrant discussion, I'll throw some of them in here as quick cuts, but at the end of the day, about 1200 glitches per 125 hours of gameplay. If you want to put this number into a more digestible way of looking at it, that's 1200 glitches per 7500 minutes, which equates to approximately 1 glitch every 6 to 7 minutes of game time. Most of these are clips from my first playthrough that was played on the last patch before the new gen update, but for the hell of it, I will sprinkle in a few glitches from the newer version as well. I want to make this absolutely clear, this game, even about 30 patches in, is clearly unfinished. It is one of the glitchiest games I have played in my life and is easily in my top 5 glitchiest AAA games that I have ever played. Considering I set a time limit on myself, let's start off with the worst bugs and work our way down. The game crashed on me about 8 times in my first playthrough. Many of these crashes happened when the game switched from in-game to pre-rendered cutscenes, my favorite one happening right at the end of the game as the credits were supposed to start rolling. Some of these crashes I can even replicate. On my first playthrough, when I died to this enemy for the first time, the game crashed and the same happened on the newer version of the game. This game really likes to softlock you. Whether you're riding Roach and just get stuck on a gate with no chance of escape, talking to an innkeep and the game locking the door behind you and even despawning stuff but still keeping invisible walls preventing you from escaping. Or even weirder softlocks where I get photographed so hard I can't get rid of the dazed effect, meaning I can't do anything except walk around until I reload a save. Or how about when the game all of a sudden turns into slow motion, the entire UI fucks up and all buttons become completely unresponsive. There are reports that if you save during this particular glitch, your entire save file gets corrupted. I, however, luckily cannot confirm this statement. There are times when the game doesn't even show where the quest you chose is supposed to be. Sometimes this can be easily reset by just flicking between a few quests, but one time even this didn't help. However, I luckily knew exactly where to go. Sometimes Roach just stops regenerating stamina and even quitting out of the game doesn't help. You have to go to a previous save to fix that. Other times, Roach just refuses to sprint. I can even dismount Roach, sprint around myself, but when I mount Roach back, she refuses to sprint. Here's a time I tried to be a little creative with my approach to exploration and as a reward got stuck in some random crevasse. The worst part is that this isn't necessarily a difficult place to get stuck in. This literally looks like somewhere I should be able to go and is extremely easy to get here. Geralt one time when biting into a dumpling broke his arm so hard that every single animation he did looked completely wrong and hilarious.
I see.
Certain open world activities like sunken treasure chests just can't be finished even after you loot them. You again have to load a previous save, loot the chests again, and hope this time the game will properly see the chest is looted. This made the chests around Skellige an even bigger pain to collect than what they already are. Speaking of water, certain actions and buttons in the game occasionally just stop working. You can try to dive and it just doesn't work. This happened like 6 or 7 times, and only on my second playthrough did I find that you can swim ashore and use a sign and you can now magically dive again. You can mash the letter V to try and read a letter and it just won't work sometimes. And speaking of not working, sometimes the game just forgets to heal me for far too long until I use a sign and now all of a sudden I get healed again. The game's AI can be so easy to exploit, it's a joke. Enemies tracking and pathfinding is horrible. You will be in full sight of enemies and they will just stand there, or worse, you will go down some stairs or a small ledge and their pathfinding completely breaks. Certain enemies can't even go through open doors, for fuck's sake. And occasionally the game either completely shits the bed and doesn't even register that I am in a combat scenario, giving me out of combat stamina regeneration, while other times you will be attacking enemies and the game will either deal 0 damage to them or not even remotely enough damage for some reason. Certain bosses and enemies don't take enough damage from quick attacks and take way too much damage from strong attacks. At first I thought this was the case because I was under-leveled and on Death March difficulty in these clips, but even being properly leveled and on the easiest difficulty, this still happens. Enemies spawn right behind you where you just were out of thin air. You can already loot a camp and a bunch of enemies spawn, and then you fight those enemies and another one spawns. You can actively be trying to spawn an enemy that you know should be there but for some reason isn't, and voila! Certain merchants and blacksmiths either can't be interacted with, or when you do interact with them, nothing happens. Sometimes they even duplicate. Enemies get stuck. You can see through the world on multiple occasions. Certain enemies are just invisible. The inventory can glitch out both visually and mechanically. It can all of a sudden decide to switch between tabs depending on how you move your mouse. Your allies will either be hitting enemies but doing 0 damage or freeze in place. While the fact that you roll downstairs is a minor bug and kind of funny actually, when this happens to you because of the inability of the developers to program stairs correctly and you lose about 15 minutes of progress, it quickly stops being funny. You can run into a fight and Geralt, instead of taking his sword out automatically, which most of the times he does, just starts fighting enemies with his fists. Then you roll away, Geralt unsheathes his sword automatically, but in the meantime you also press the button to unsheath and now he puts it away again. Here I'm over encumbered when I shouldn't be, enemies spazzing out, enemies T-posing, Geralt getting stuck in an animation where every enemy he kills is the exact same execution. Whatever the fuck this is.
Play. I see.
People are floating in walls, people float on the streets, they also ice skate on the streets, enemies' bodies yeet into the skies, enemies break completely and are unable to attack, or they are just unable to turn enough to hit you. This lady tells me she's out of flowers, then tells me to wait here, then 0.2 seconds of waiting later gives me some flowers that she pulled out of her Twinkie cave, I guess, because they weren't there a few seconds ago. This guy is a magician? I don't understand how crabs haven't taken over the world if they're that big, can levitate and go invisible at the same time. Neither do I understand why at a certain part of the map in the Blood and Wine DLC did the developers decide to do this with the brightness and contrast and then proceed to just hard cut back to the correct contrast all of a sudden. Why is the tutorial for underwater combat hidden in a side quest in Velen at around level 10, and why is the tutorial for horseback combat hidden until the tourney in Toussaint, which is in the second DLC, so at around level 40. People tend to be inside one another, cutscenes not rendering bodies, and speaking of rendering, poison gas or poison clouds, whatever you want to call them, occasionally seem to hit you even when they're not there. But that is not the case, they just don't render properly for some reason. Look here, the poison cloud reaches all the way to this body right here, and yet looking at it from another angle, the poison gas renders completely differently and is way further back than it actually is. There is a myriad of floating things, animals, people, grass, rocks, and other objects around the map, but my favorite has to be this entire field of flowers. By the way, if you look at the minimap in this scenario, it is clearly telling me that in order to reach a certain quest I should go forward here, but this is the edge of the map, meaning I can't go there. This of course is because the minimap lies. Sometimes it glitches out, sometimes it shows double icons on the map, other times it shows enemies when they aren't there, then again other times it shows paths that just aren't there. Most of the time it gets you exactly where you need to go, other times it tries taking you through locked doors or down wrong paths. Many times it doesn't line up with how the world really is, and hopefully with how much you'll be looking at it, you will miss the dumbass things Roach does. Roach can spawn in places where you can't reach her, other times she just refuses to spawn, she can't go up small inclines or apparently even over certain bridges until she all of a sudden remembers she actually can. She will wait for you patiently during fights, but when you approach her, she decides to run away. Whenever there is a gap in the road, she slows down and refuses to go further, even though she has her own designated jump button. She can get stuck on sidewalks, roofs, doors, and even certain bridges. Other times, she will either not follow the road you want her to follow, or out of nowhere do one of her patented yeehaw maneuvers. And at the best of times, she might have issues climbing up a small incline while doing the yeehaw maneuver and then getting stuck in nothing, all within a 5-second time span. When it comes to sound glitches or mistakes in this game, there luckily isn't a lot to talk about. Your swords can all of a sudden start making the sound of like 7 swords at once. Certain fire effects can loop forever. Both the sound mixing and mastering can be off at times.
To be born again, I must first be consumed.
Go now and return through the passage I have opened.
Seriously, I am going to blur some of the subtitles and you tell me what's going on.
Convince him to spite the soldiers' nosh with something to keep some of them better. 1 in 2. To raise suspicions.
I see.
Monologue and dialogue can overlap if you're not careful.
Just smart brains don't belong to any variety.
Certain voice acting is not up to par. I discovered how to glitch a sound and make it loop forever. Some sound effects are either not completely in sync or just missing. Listen, there are so many glitches left, being unable to even react to certain attacks when transitioning into a fight. You teleporting, or the enemies teleporting, or both teleporting. I could just keep going on forever, but instead I'll just supercut a few of the visual ones here while I segue into my next point. I want to make it known that I understand there are parts that I missed and even parts that I really wanted to discuss in depth, but in the interest of time I just couldn't, so I'll quickly and very loosely talk about some of them here. For instance, most enemies don't have any gap-closing attacks or moves, so before when I was constantly banging about that 3 to 4 step combat loop with a good chunk of enemies, you can do an even more boring loop where you strong attack from afar, dodge directly backwards, strong attack, dodge directly backwards, rinse and repeat, and most enemies won't be able to do anything. I mean, even some DLC bosses won't be able to do anything with this method and you'll completely break them. I hate how the music is used in this game.
One of us, Egil, went mute all of a sudden. No spell or potion helps him. But it is said strong emotions and experiences.
It's just there all the time while exploring, in combat, in cutscenes, ruining dialogue. Sometimes it starts out of nowhere, other times it ends out of nowhere, really distractingly, mind you.
Hands of cutthroats.
Can't help but be curious, but where do the funds for those payments come from?
The ducal treasury, of course.
What does your son look like?
Unlike others, easily distinguished. In all Nilfgaard's army, I do not think there was another with his mane. The color of fire.
A red-haired Nilfgaardian?
His father hailed from Magturga. Folk have...
I don't hate any particular track, I think the composers did a fantastic job, but the fact that you can be casually following a path, listening to the scenic music and some random enemy 20 meters away gets aggroed to you, and all of a sudden the music immediately switches to one of the battle tracks just for it to stop 2 seconds later is absolutely infuriating to me. It also doesn't help that some of the music is so hype that it just completely ruins certain encounters for me. Like, take the tracks Silver for Monsters and Steel for Humans as an example. These are clearly meant to be hype, blood-pumping tracks that get you further engrossed in the fight ahead of you. And yet these tracks can play as you stand there with a bunch of enemies swimming, not even being able to attack you, or when you're so over-leveled that the enemies can barely damage you. It's so phony and tries way too hard to make every single fight seem like a huge struggle when it just isn't. Imagine the Song of the Dragonborn not being reserved for dragon fights, but instead be used in fights against packs of low-level wolves that can barely hurt you. Or the Taurus Demons OST playing while in the tutorial area where nothing can hurt you. It should also be noted how weird and awkward the transition from exploration to combat feels. Like, I can't put this into words properly, but Geralt sprints faster than an Olympic sprinter. He fucking zooms. Yet when you put him in a combat situation, his overall speed and mobility just plummet into the negatives. He feels slow, weighty, and clunky. But then whenever you dodge in combat, it feels like there's no weight behind it. It's so weird. The game can't seem to decide whether you're an Olympic athlete, a slow-moving tank, or if you're Track 6 from the 1985 self-titled album by Katrina and the Waves, so you're just all of it at once. It's so weird. The next-gen update that this game received is also a mixed bag. Like, purely the fact that a company cares enough to do this for free should be praised and revered. The fact that they added genuine improvements like making it easier to farm herbs, stamina not depleting while outside of combat, quick sign casting instead of having to go into a goddamn menu every time you want to change signs. A new camera that I personally prefer to the old camera, yet still leaving the old camera setting in the options, even a new Easter egg. But then, on the other hand, you have a horrible launch that needed weeks of time and multiple patches to fix because nobody tested this shit. A mandatory 55GB update where people who don't have a strong enough PC to play this new graphically enhanced version have to download it and then revert back to a previous patch instead of just, I don't know, giving us an option. A new launcher for no apparent reason, fixes to some of the most annoying quests in the game that didn't need fixes. Where once you could cheese this by leaving this sleeping bastard behind and just run to the end of the level, now you're forced into a 10-minute walking simulator with nothing happening. Same with the piggy quest, by the way. Why fix this? Why not fix any of the thousands of other bugs or glitches in this game? I don't get it. Again, like most things in this game, CD Projekt seem to have the best intentions, but the execution is always a mixed bag. And speaking of mixed bag, the last thing in this section of things I just quickly want to mention are the difficulty settings. In concept, I love difficulty settings. They are a nice way to have different types of players choose their own preferred difficulty level, but damn do I wish this game didn't have them. It's so weird because everything I said in the combat section of this video might have been seen by people and they thought I played an entirely different game to them just because of the difficulty setting I chose. People seeing the footage of me hitting an enemy for minutes might remember that same encounter and sit there thinking, wow, I killed that guy in 2 hits, just because of the difficulty setting they chose. Same with the werewolves, me saying that they literally heal faster than you deal damage is only really an issue on the harder difficulty settings and again, only in the early game. So I wish that the developers just bit the bullet and made the game have just one difficulty setting, that being either the easiest or the second easiest setting, with perhaps more of them unlocking every time you finish the game. And it's so weird saying that. Not only because I usually prefer harder difficulty settings, but because like I said before, the game even on the hardest difficulty after a while becomes a cakewalk. But just the fact that you can almost never run into a situation where combat takes minutes to finish because enemies don't have an 80% or a 130% buff to their health is enough for me to prefer playing on these settings. No enemy in the base game is complex or difficult enough to warrant you having minute-long battles with them. Granted, on the easiest setting the pendulum flips completely to the other side since bosses and enemies now just fall down in literally 3 hits. And because of that, stuff like alchemy becomes even less viable and is worth even less of your time. And weirdly enough, enemies spawn more frequently on the easiest difficulty setting. I have never had 5 or 6 ghouls ambush me at the start of the game except on the easiest difficulty. I have also never had these drowners ambush me in the blacksmith arsonist quest in White Orchard except on the easiest difficulty. So I just wish that the developers either didn't give us the option of the harder difficulties or in turn developed an actually deep, consistent and rewarding combat system that warranted these buffs to enemies. However, the way it is now, they did neither. So my recommendation is to just stick to the easiest difficulties to try and minimize any and all frustrations that this clearly underbaked combat system will put on you. And we are finally on the verge of ending this part of the video, the really important part of the video, and yet I am so sorry. There is something else we need to discuss. Something I have been holding on to for all this time. You see, in the beginning, I played a clip of Jack Sater saying this.
And it's a must-play for any fan of open-world fantasy RPGs.
And in the background, I edited the words, "Keep this last sentence in mind." Well, Jack, and if you ever watch this video, I'm sorry that I'm calling you out like this, you seem like a really nice guy. I even like your content and you're self-admittedly inspired by one of my favorite YouTubers, Nakey Jakey, so you keep doing you. But I don't think I have ever heard a sentence I disagreed with more in my entire life. Let's take a look at why. Ignoring the fact that I could just point you back to the part of the video where I explained how bad the combat and reward systems are and how monotonous the open world encounters are, you can just rewatch part 4 of this video from the beginning for that. I want to present people with the fact that enemies you kill in the open world reward you with XP. Revolutionary concept, I know, but bear with me please. Here is footage of me and the exact number of XP I have before killing a wild griffin so overleveled I don't even know what its level was. And here is footage of me a few minutes later killing it and the XP I have after killing it. A player knows the ins and outs of a combat system to such a ridiculous degree that he is able to kill an enemy around 15 to 20 levels higher than himself on the hardest difficulty, and the game chooses to reward him with 40 XP. For context, after this fight I went to a group of wolves camping like 20 meters away from where the griffin slaying took place that were only 1 level above me, and the warg was like 4 levels above me and I got 12 XP. Let's say about a third of what the griffin gave. As a fun fact, the wiki for the game states that you can get anywhere from 1 XP at the minimum and the maximum you can get for an encounter is 48 XP. Now, this is already a weird choice, giving the player such a low amount of XP for what should be a glorious moment is not uncalled for in games, but it is extremely unorthodox. It screams of the developers not wanting the player to get too overleveled, which, hey, a bit of handholding to prevent the player from getting too strong and the game getting too easy is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, speaking of giving players low amounts of XP, quest rewards work in a very interesting way as well. Each quest has a designated amount of XP you get, but only if you are the exact level or lower than the recommended level for said quest. So if a quest has a recommended level of 10, if you beat said quest at level 10 or lower, you will get 100% of the XP. However, and here's the real kicker, if you are above the recommended quest level, you will get progressively less XP. If you are at least 6 levels, or on the new patch 10 levels higher than the quest level, you get 5% of the quest XP. Meaning the quest I wanted to complete gives 40 XP when you're at the same level as the quest. Now I want you to keep these two things in mind. The fact that enemies in the open world give XP and that you being overleveled for a quest gives you less XP, potentially 95% less XP. Trust me, I am really close to proving a point, just give me a few more seconds, maybe a minute. Now luckily for me, every time you wish to access the endgame parts of the game, it gives you this warning. It not only warns you that certain quests will be locked from now on and that you can't finish them if you choose to proceed, but also that the recommended level for this part of the game is 22. So imagine my surprise when on my first character, where I did essentially everything in the open world on hard difficulty, I was only level 24. But I thought nothing of it, I just thought the game really needed you to explore every single nook and cranny. So imagine my surprise when on my second playthrough on a harder difficulty, the hardest difficulty mind you, that gives less XP for basically everything, I ignored every single aspect of the open world. I never went and explored anything. Almost no question mark on the map was completed. I only did side quests I got from people in my direct vicinity and from notice boards and such. I arrived at the same part of the game as level 27. Compared to my first playthrough, I had spent dozens of hours less in the world. I never received or finished dozens of quests that I finished on my first playthrough because, again, I didn't explore. Potentially hundreds of encounters that I skipped this time around, thousands of enemies fewer killed, a difficulty setting that gave me 10% less XP, and yet despite all of that, I arrived at this exact same spot 3 levels higher with the same or even slightly better quality gear. The playthrough where I sat there and just followed the quests, ticking them off one by one like it's a list of chores and ignored 99% of the open world in this open world game with 4 different open worlds, is the playthrough where I came out overleveled, not the other way around. So when I sit here and see videos where claims such as
and it's a must-play for any fan of open-world fantasy RPGs
are being made, I have to respectfully ask the person who made said claims to shut up, perhaps go and collect some Skellige underwater chests and try not to be bored out of their goddamn mind while they're doing it, and actually interact with the system that you are praising so much to where you would call it a
must-play for any fan of open-world fantasy RPGs.
Because as a person who doesn't have a preference between open-world games and linear games and who just doesn't like their time being wasted with meaningless busywork, I would borderline say that it is a must-ignore for anyone that likes open-world RPGs. I literally cannot think of a single aspect of this game that couldn't be bettered or enhanced in a meaningful way. I'm not saying any of these aspects I criticize so far are horrible or unplayable, mind you, but At the end of the day, when you boil it down to its most simple terms, The Witcher 3 is a story and character-driven, open-world action-adventure game with light role-playing elements, or an RPG light if you will. Now, the definition of what is and isn't an RPG is vague and nebulous. To some people, a game that has a character creation screen and nothing else RPG related is enough to be called an RPG. On the complete other side of the scale, you have Dungeons & Dragons, a primarily story-driven game where the entire point is role-playing. Every single tiny detail of how your character would exist and interact with the world is down to you, the player, and the DM to a certain degree, I guess. I see this as essentially the ultimate RPG. And then there are the thousands of games in between with various people seeing the line between RPG and non-RPG in thousands of different positions. That's why I call this game an RPG light. The decisions when leveling up Geralt and when interacting with the world, to me, are not substantial enough to call it an RPG like I would many other games. This, by the way, is not me trying to say RPG lights are better or worse than RPGs. Hell, to a certain degree I would even call Dark Souls an RPG light, and that's like the best game ever made. I'm just trying to explain my stance on why I don't call this game an RPG. Now, the action-adventure parts of this game, aka how you deal with enemy encounters in combat, are again something that I would just barely call functional. With the risk of repeating myself, considering I talked about this for far too long, purely the fact that I cannot tell what kind of combat system this third-person action-adventure game uses, and yet it constantly forces that combat system down your throat, should be enough to conclude how mediocre it is in this regard, without having to drudge up every single point I made in the last hour or so. And then you take a look at the open world aspect of this game and you see a now almost universally hated Ubisoft-like spamming of random repetitive stuff on your map. With great world building, mind you, and more love and logic put into it than the usual Ubisoft-like filler bullshit, but at the end of the day, and again sorry for repeating myself, filler bullshit that actively, and I truly and honestly do mean that, actively works against you and punishes you by giving you so much XP that now all of a sudden quests don't give you XP, and now all of a sudden you're not nearly as high of a level as you should be. You can blame the quest XP penalty for that. This could all be the fault of that stupid mechanic, not necessarily the fact that enemies you kill in the open world give you XP. But no matter which way you look at this, at the end of the day, this is ultimately a mechanic that actively punishes you for exploring and interacting with the open world, meaning that the open world and all of its sights, fights, and shitty rewards are ultimately meaningless and have significant room for improvement, which leaves us with one last, final part. 2 hours into this behemoth of a video and I am stuck between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, I understand that if I want to give proper credit to the story, writing, and characters of this game, I need to make a video that's at least 4 or 5 hours longer. Now, for obvious reasons, I don't want to do that, not only because this video will spiral out of control into an unwatchable mess, but also because I love touching grass. However, I do also understand that people will be disappointed by this fact. I am almost certain that if you ask the vast majority of people, they love this game because of its writing, so dedicating only about an hour to it might seem kind of backwards at first. The story and subsequently characters of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt have left a huge impression on people all around the world for almost a decade now. No conversation about the game is complete without mentioning them. Nobody would take this video seriously if I didn't mention them. And the reason that I have decided not to dedicate more time to this section is because no amount of praise I can give them will change the fact that, to me, this story makes little sense and has no emotional heart. In case you forgot, and I wouldn't blame you, it's been over an hour and a half since I last mentioned the story. So far, the story has been great. We found Yen, we went to see the Emperor, he wants us to bring back his daughter, who is also kind of Geralt's daughter, but not really. So we set off to Velen in search for clues. And this story that thus far has been really great is about to get even better. No matter what I just said in the past hour and a half, if there is something I would ask any of the 36% of people that didn't even get to the meeting with Yen, is for them to put this game on the easiest difficulty and just play through the game until they finish the Bloody Baron questline. The way this series of quests in Velen in particular unravels into a dark, depressing, just horrific web of terror is something to marvel at. It starts off so simple. After seeing that the spy you were supposed to meet has died at the hands of the Wild Hunt, you go after your only remaining clue. This is Philip Strenger, aka the Bloody Baron. His daughter and wife went missing, however he luckily also saw Ciri. He even took care of her for some time and has information regarding her whereabouts. Find his family and he will tell you everything he knows about Ciri.
Tit for tat.
So you begin your detective work hunting for any clues that could help you. And then you find signs of a struggle in the Baron's room. And then you realize that his wife and child haven't gone missing, nor have they been kidnapped. They left. Willingly. And the Baron knows this, but out of sheer self-hatred and self-pity, lies to you about this. Why does self-hatred and pity, you ask? Because he is a sad and miserable man who drinks away his troubles and memories of war and all the people he has killed and friends he's lost. The same war where he met and fell in love with his now wife, who as a medic on the front lines nursed him. But as he went off to fight in more wars, she actively and constantly cheated on him with other men, some of which he even murdered. She apparently never let this down and constantly kept reminding him of it, trying to anger him at every given opportunity. There are even suicide attempts involved in this story arc. All of this of course led to more drinking and more wife beating. Then you realize his wife was pregnant with his second child on the night that she and her daughter escaped. And that in a drunken and rage-filled stupor, the Baron hit his wife and made her fall to the ground, leading to a miscarriage. With the young daughter now having to save her mother's life, witness a miscarriage and try to stop the bleeding, and it just keeps going and going and going and going until there is nothing but this black hole of pure depression left. It is fantastic. All of it. The personal parts of it are fantastic, the supernatural parts of it are fantastic, the voice acting is fantastic. Sure, there are some parts that drag on a bit too much and some weird sound mixing and mastering issues that I already mentioned, but overall, A+. The quests surrounding the secondary characters of Velen are also mostly fantastic. My personal favorite of these quests, of course, being a tower full of mice, where a good friend of yours from the books apparently, Kira Metz, asks you to go to a tower on an island where one of her wizard friends was making the cure for the bubonic plague.
This Xenovox, can I contact you with it or is it one way?
One way only, I'm afraid. You'll have to trust my feminine intuition.
Your what?
My feminine intuition!
Wonderful.
Just for you to arrive there to a deserted tower that is now haunted by the daughter of a once wealthy and influential family that got killed in a riot, where a group of peasants who were sick and tired of this family living in excess and not sharing any of its wealth to the peasantry broke in and released the rats. Of course, The Witcher being The Witcher, you hear in vivid detail how the same mice that were being tested on by the wizard to try and create a vaccine slowly and painfully nibbled through the belly of the woman who was incapacitated by a potion but could still feel every single bite. This game just hates fun and happy thoughts, I swear. Anyway, back to the Baron. Before either meeting his maker or taking his wife to a hermit, vowing to never touch drink again, he tells you Ciri went to the free city of Novigrad. Now I want to make this clear from the start, Novigrad is hand on heart the single most incredible medieval city I have seen in my life, and an absolute feat of world design in gaming. The way it is completely seamlessly integrated with the open world, the muddy, rat and pig infested alleys close to the base of the city, with crumbling buildings, some even having man-made supports to prevent them from falling, are perfectly juxtaposed by the temples and rich architecture of the highest highs of the city, with everything in between being a perfectly logical and fantastically designed blend of taverns, banks, shops, libraries, even bathhouses. There are marketplaces scattered throughout this city, the one closest to the docks mostly peddling fish, the one directly in the middle of the city generating the most diverse selection with the most amount of people visiting it. The docks themselves house many a ship, with additional ones being built right next to storage buildings packed with supplies for journeymen. Religious preachers are posted on many major crossroads in the city and essentially at every entrance to it. Schools and clinics positioned at the poorest parts of the city, many of them working for free, while the religious elite live high and mighty at the top, living both off people's fears and their donations. Even to a complete troglodyte like myself, who usually doesn't really care about world design, something about Novigrad is so indescribably fantastic from a purely architectural standpoint that, again, like many things in this game, it deserves hour-long discussions. But when you look at the story and characters of this section of the game, it is so clear to see how many corners CD Projekt Red cut in order to make this city a reality, which to me completely and utterly ruins any enjoyment I still have from the story of this game and brings said story to an almost grinding halt. For instance, you arrive at this city in search of two people, Triss and Ciri. Right in front of Triss's house, the religious fanatics that have taken over the city are burning a Doppler. So imagine my surprise when the first sentence that Geralt says after witnessing the burning is,
"Sure hope Dudu hasn't met the same fate."
Who's Dudu? What's a Dudu? How do you know Dudu? How do you know Dudu is here? Why are you mentioning Dudu? Why is their name Dudu? Aren't we here for Triss and Ciri? Dudu?
Dudu.
So okay, off to a weird start. I guess Dudu's gonna be an important character later on. Then, 5 seconds later, you walk through the front gate of Triss's house just to find it being looted by two masked men. What I'm about to show you is the greatest piece of dialogue I have ever seen in my life. Ready?
Not here for the loot. Interested in the sorcerers who lived here.
We're supposed to believe that.
Yeah.
Most likely hiding in some rat trap with the rest of them.
Oh, you think we're just gonna tell you what you want to know?
Yes.
I'd bet. Here's my bank account number, my social security number, the Krabby Patty secret formula, and the key to my lifetime supply of haywood. Haywood? Hey, would you blow me? A few seconds later, Menga, the leader of the Temple Guard, arrives. The Temple Guard is essentially a terrorist group responsible for all the witch, Doppler and sorcerer burnings in this city. What they say goes. So imagine my surprise when all of a sudden he tells me,
"Nothing I can do to you now."
Why? You essentially have complete authority. You are killing every man, woman and child in a mile-wide radius that knows how to make tea, for fuck's sake. Every single person with even a bit of magic in them has to live in some random alley behind a password-protected locked gate that only takes in magic users. Why do you have nothing on me? So now I ask a homeless person nicely and he tells me exactly where I need to go to find the mages and even what the password is. Arriving there, I meet both Triss and the King of Beggars. It's clear to me that the King of Beggars is the one holding all the strings here and could kick out the mages at any time he wants. He even directly tells you his plans of taking over the city with his friends. Keep this in mind, considering the fact that apart from a cutscene where he's semi-naked, a cutscene where he walks past a tavern window, and a horse race he organizes for some reason, you will never hear from this person again, and in a few hours' time, Triss will just randomly take over his role. And that to me is Novigrad in a nutshell. Whenever the story is kind of interesting and does make sense, I find the gameplay of this place absolutely boring. It just consists of running around Novigrad from point A to point B to point C back to point A. The city itself is so complex that your best chance is to just constantly keep your eyes on the minimap and ignore everything happening around you. But then most of the time, to me, this entire part of the story and everything surrounding it is clearly rushed. Looking at the side quests, this is the first time in the game where contracts kind of stopped making sense and their gimmick of holding right click to find red glowing items started feeling forced. It is so clear that this old lady or someone in the village should know what's going on. The creature haunting them is called the White Lady. She is a noon wraith, so a ghost that literally spawns during the day in an open field. A group of men even tried to go over there and bang her so she would stop haunting, and yet no one thinks that this White Lady is Lucy, a bride that a few days ago ran away from the altar. Of course not, because the gameplay designers need me to hold right click and press E on a bunch of red glowing items. These people not only know about the existence of the Wild Hunt, but one of them even saw them on the night a murder took place and just didn't tell me anything because, again, the gameplay designers need me to hold right click a bunch and press E on some red glowing items. And then you take a look at the main story of this place and the frustrations just keep piling up. Meeting Zoltan for the first time after everything that happened between us in the past 2 games is equally a great moment and completely unsatisfying. This man used to be part of the Scoia'tael, a group of rebels that can now only be found in one side quest, but that in the first 2 games used to be some of the main characters that you could heavily disagree with, by the way. They even put him in charge of one of their units, and yet here he is in the middle of Novigrad with no Scoia'tael connections to speak of, and no ability to ask him what happened. Dijkstra is my favorite character of not just this section, but the entire game. Think Littlefinger meets Varys meets the most sarcastic motherfucker you have ever seen. 1 second, this man will be running circles around you, knowing every bit of information about you, your family, your friends, and your friends' friends. The amount of information this man possesses at times seems supernatural. Then the next second, as you'll be completely dumbfounded with how he knows all of this, he'll start explaining to you how he would tell you, but he's in a bad mood because he's experiencing menopause or some bullshit. It's honestly fantastic.
Probably shouldn't ask, but Dijkstra, how the hell do you know all this?
I draw it all from the flight patterns of birds.
Your sarcasm. It gets tiring, you know.
You can even work in the shadows with this man, plotting to assassinate the king. He has connections everywhere, nothing is out of reach for him. However, the reason I liken Dijkstra to Littlefinger and Varys isn't just because of his spies and his information acquiring abilities. No, it's because he goes out like a Saturday morning cartoon villain. After being the silent spy in the background, having his spies and reach essentially everywhere, knowing everything, he walks onto a stage after successfully assassinating King Radovid and proclaims, "Haha, I have betrayed you, all of you dumbasses, and now that I have betrayed you, I also plan on assassinating you." This man didn't just silently kill us all. He didn't wait for us to get drunk or poison us or wait for Geralt to leave or anything. And when I of course was having none of it, the man with the broken leg and who can't fight, doesn't run, doesn't plead, doesn't hide. He takes out a hammer and tries to take on a bunch of well-trained warriors and a fucking Witcher, for fuck's sake. I can't believe that I am reliving the death of Littlefinger and now unironically going, wow, that scene could have been so much worse. Moving on to Triss, she essentially takes over the King of Beggars place in the story by being able to get the word out to dozens if not hundreds of magic users of an escape plan out of Novigrad. She even arranges a meeting spot for when the escape takes place, procures the ships from Dijkstra, makes sure that nobody will be there when they escape, and somehow also knows of a secret passage below some tavern through the sewers. But when you actually get to the secret passage, there is no route through. Triss even proclaims,
"Damn it! No way through! All is lost!"
Really? You managed to get all of this set up, all of these moving parts to all converge on this exact plan at an exact time, but you never went and checked if the secret passage actually leads to where you want it to lead? The worst part about this is that you just knock down a wall with Ard, continue down the path and arrive at a random locked gate in the middle of the sewers that Triss somehow has the key to. It makes no sense. What's going on? I almost forgot about Vernon Roach, if that tells you how important he is. He is literally a character that you potentially spent an entire game's worth of time in the second game. You got to know him and Vess, what he fights for, his beliefs, and so many things. But in this game, he is relegated to one main quest and a couple of side quests where he plays like fourth fiddle to everyone else. Such a waste of a great character. Saving Dandelion is also just a slap in the face. This man has been my best friend for the past 2 games. When he found out I wasn't dead and was still alive, he almost fainted. He was so overjoyed. In The Witcher 2, I saved him from a hanging and he immediately showed his gratefulness. He even bought me a beer and gave me the lay of the lands. He has always been a womanizer and a bit pompous, sure, but never has he been a completely unlikable jerk. And then I save him in The Witcher 3 and the first words out of his mouth are,
"Geralt, must you ruin everything? I had him just where I wanted him."
In this game, he is an arrogant, insufferable asshole with him showing emotions only when the potential love of his life is on the deathbed. The reason you save him, by the way, is because he was helping Ciri. He robbed Dijkstra to get enough coin to pay for a person who knows how to fix a phylactery. So you save him, he tells you everything he knows and then says that Ciri constantly kept repeating something to herself. Now surely this game isn't going to do the classic thing where the character is gonna tell me the exact words needed to lift some ancient magic curse, right? Especially not Dandelion. Not only was he preoccupied with getting information this entire time, but he also couldn't even remember the name Alvin in the first game.
They called him by his name. I think it was Alpin or Albin or something.
No, Dandelion. Alvin. A completely normal name that is really easy to remember. Do you have dementia? Surely they won't do that. He won't know every single syllable and pronunciation of this sentence. That surely won't be in a mystical, magical language that nobody has spoken in for hundreds of years now, right?
Vafile Elaine, Kiadmil Foli. Gladev Dorn Ep Tanaid, Bundro Isne Iakas.
I don't have time. And then there's Whoreson Jr. This entire trek through Novigrad and the dozens of characters in it has all led up to this. You heard all about how bad of a guy he is, and then you finally meet him and it's completely anticlimactic. Like, sure, he kills women, he has bodies of women he murdered just hanging around his room as he's doing his makeup or something. He's a complete psycho who I have never left alive in any of my playthroughs that got to here. But this cutscene that plays out when you meet him is unironically one of the funniest scenes in the game. It's so clearly unfinished, it's hilarious. I don't know how much of it I'll be able to show because the bodies of the girls that he murdered are naked and I don't want YouTube to have a heart attack if I show a micropixel of an areola.
For fuck's sake!
No one's coming.
Stop!
But sound effects are missing. The way it cuts between Geralt punching Whoreson and his face is hysterical. Geralt punches like this. Who punches like that? The hanging bodies in the background clearly don't have a weight set in the game engine, so they are constantly being blown around by the wind. Sometimes they're still, then they're swinging around like crazy, then they swing a bit less, and then they're swinging around like crazy again, and again they're completely still. It's such a shame, such a potentially strong moment ruined because the devs decided to spend their time on other, in my opinion, less important things. Which is a perfect transition into Skellige. I don't dislike Skellige, and in no way am I as frustrated with it as I am with Novigrad. I mean, there's only 2 main quests here, so I don't understand how I could be as frustrated, but I'm still frustrated. Unlike Novigrad, which already starts pretty poorly, Skellige actually starts really well. You arrive at a funeral which perfectly shows the culture of these people. There's a line of dialogue here that's so good I have never and probably will never choose the other option.
You smell wonderful.
Geralt, we're at a funeral.
You smell wonderful at this funeral.
It's great. It reminds me of that time in The Witcher 1 where Geralt kept throwing compliments to a goddess about her wisdom and fairness and how intelligent and all-knowing she is, with her constantly shutting these compliments down. And then one time Geralt just dropped the facade and went,
"Your ass puts others to shame."
It's these small, funny interactions that stay in my head years after I beat these games. And of course, lesbomancy, but I digress.
Lesbomancy.
So following the funeral, it's time for a giant feast where everyone is invited.
Just out of curiosity, why do they call you Madman?
So you and Yennefer take this opportunity to sneak to a secret laboratory to get the Mask of Ouroboros, an item that will help you find Ciri. Time to get angry at the game again, so you sneak past some guards by hiding behind a tapestry and arrive at your first roadblock.
See the ravens?
Hard not to.
Ermien's spies.
Okay, let's play a quick game of Who Wants to Be a Florinioneer. You arrive at a locked door with Ermien's spies above it. Do you A. quickly move behind the corner hoping they didn't see or hear you? B. Try to act natural and just slowly turn around and try to not raise suspicion? C. Do you shoo the spies away with any of your signs or Yen's magic? Or D. Stand there in front of Ermien's spies like a complete mouth breather in full view and hearing distance of them as you discuss your plan to steal from Ermien. So then you lay your plans bare for the spies to hear, but that still begs the question, how are we gonna get past this locked door with spies above it? Through an unlocked door that's right next to the locked door for some reason. Well, no spies in this room or Ermien's bedroom. Oh look, a locked door with hallucinogenic clouds gushing out. That's a neat trick. So you fight some non-existing animals, Yen laughs at you, she also unlocked the door while you were tripping balls because her lockpicking skills are at 100 apparently, then she locks the door, you complete a puzzle, a secret passage opens up, and I'm going to let this cutscene play while I say nothing at all.
This is it. We've got it. We must return to the feast quickly before...
Okay, no, but seriously, am I being unfair? You are a professional witcher who hunts monsters and has a medallion that senses danger and starts vibrating uncontrollably when near said danger. Yes, look, the mask is right there. Just look a bit behind it. There is a goddamn golem right there. Listen, it's even making noises.
This is it.
Which reminds me...
Ermion spies.
Why do you need 20 fucking spies on one fucking door that isn't even the only door? Like, what the... You could have placed them here, or in this hallway, or next to this puzzle, or around the fucking mask, or in 30 positions that would have made more sense than above a locked door that has an unlocked door a meter next to it. So then you beat the golem and poisonous gas starts filling the room and Yen says,
Think of something, quickly. First thing to come to your mind.
Okay, teleport us a short way back from where we just came from through the gate that closed behind us. Or teleport us to Ermion's room, or teleport us to Hawaii. Hawaii sounds nice this time of year. Sure. So with the Mask of Ouroboros in hand, you then go to the site of a magical explosion which leads to a fantastic second quest where you have to retrieve and reanimate the dead body of a man who saved Ciri, and essentially painfully extract any and all information this man has. This part of the main quest is great and I have no quarrels with it. I even love how if you kill a werewolf named Morkvark before doing this quest, you have some different lines of dialogue in this cutscene. But I want to talk about the secondary quests of Skellige for just one bit because I absolutely despise some of them. Now the quests surrounding the coronation of a new ruler of Skellige themselves are actually great. Ridding a man of an evil spirit by tricking the man into thinking you burned his baby alive in a pizza oven. Rescuing a group of people from a giant that they swore to kill, solving the bear massacre. Considering who you followed through this final quest results in that person being the next ruler of Skellige. So who are our contestants for ruler? Well, option 1, a person who is such a background character I couldn't even tell you his name, whose only claim to the throne is that he is the same blood as the previous ruler. He's still somehow a slightly better option than option 2. A hot-headed, war-hungry, stay with our prehistoric ideals and constantly keep pillaging ships that want us no harm type of guy, who descends the Isles into decades of war and bloodshed. And option 3, the clearly best option. This person vows to always listen to their elders and learn while understanding that taking time and mulling things over is the correct way to go instead of just running in head first. A person who brings decades of peace and prosperity to the Isles while still not completely alienating the people of Skellige from their old school ideals and traditions. However, there is one major downside to this person. She's a girl. Yeah, listen. I understand that historically speaking, girls have been dragged through the mud, used as essentially baby-bearing trade offers to birth children or to mend relationships between kingdoms, or political pawns with which rulers would betray other rulers at certain points. With almost no country, kingdom, or empire ever even taking into account the possibility of having a female ruler, as they were always wrongly seen as lesser to men. But when you give me a decision in a video game and the decision is so clear-cut, I don't understand why you're giving me a decision at all. So many decisions in these games can be talked about forever with so many pieces of information to take into account, but not this one? Like, the only thing I can imagine CD Projekt Red is going for here is showing that female rulers could have been just as great if not even better than male rulers. Because if this wasn't the thing CD Projekt Red was going for here, then the only way Cerys isn't just the clearly best option is if I'm sexist subhuman filth who still thinks women belong nowhere else but in the kitchen. A woman Running my country? Why, I never. My forefather... A woman? Running my country? The only thing women should be running is away. Was that even funny? Can I even make that joke? Kanye's a Nazi now. I don't even know if I can make that joke anymore. Fuck it, I'll have my editor cut it out. And this trend of underdeveloped quests just continues throughout Skellige. Like, take the quest where I can take the side of the elders or the younger generations, for example. There is a lesson in the woods next to a small village. The elders tell me not to kill it. Surviving the same lesson encounter has molded this small group of people into the best hunters on the island. But the younger generation think it's clearly unnecessary to throw good lives away for some random monster. And while I understand both sides, I took the side of the youngsters, killing the lesson and getting rid of it. So I arrive back to a slaughter. This fuck killed every single old person and anyone who stood in his way. It's clear he intends to now rule with an iron fist, and it's so clear to me that this is a horrible thing, but when I tell him he's wrong and then proceed to attempt to attack him, the game tells me, you can't attack this target. Why? Why not? It's the same with that guy that's tied next to a river in Velen. You save him just to find him running essentially a bandit camp that's killing and robbing people. He offers you the gold for saving him, and if you accept the gold, because for all I know he could have it hidden somewhere, the game then denies you the option of killing him. Why? Why can't I take the gold and then kill him? It's more forgivable in Velen as it's the start of the game, but we are now 40 hours into the game and it's still pulling stuff like this. A baby is inflicted with a curse. You soon find out that this man's ex-wife put said curse onto the baby because he left her years ago. And as tradition in the village, everyone now ignores her, thinking she's a bad wife or something. But instead of the game giving me 50 different choices where I bribe her, intimidate her, plead with her and tell her she's gone too far with targeting the baby, give her like 5,000 coins so that she can build herself a mansion proving she's worthy, my only options are to kill her or to force this man to go back to her. Why? I know I went off topic there for a minute, but again, I could talk about this game forever and ever and just never run out of these stupid scenarios. However, the point of this segment is to talk about the main story and characters, so I will pivot back into that. So you have finally gotten everything you need to solve this puzzle. Velen gave us the first look at Uma, a character who at first you think is just a one-off gag that has only now in Skellige proven to be an incredibly important piece of the puzzle. So you ride back to Velen, take Uma for yourself, and with the knowledge of the exact words needed to utter, you and Uma ride for Kaer Morhen. Your arrival at Kaer Morhen is filled with memories if you've played the first game. Even though you only interacted with Kaer Morhen, Eskel and Lambert in the prologue of The Witcher 1, it is such a memorable location. And CD Projekt Red clearly put a lot of work into making it look as close as possible to the original version while also expanding on it. Exploring the open world here isn't just an arrive, kill and loot gameplay loop. Despite this open world being much smaller than most of the other ones, it still manages to pack in sections where you can see the ghosts of all the younglings turned into witchers and the day-to-day anguish they had to go through. This part of it is actually great. I wish there were more of these types of sections scattered throughout the game. And going back to the main story of the game, Vesemir decides to try one of his own rituals, which involves taking Uma into the mountains. Before that, however, you can have some nice bonding moments with Eskel, make fun of Lambert.
Lambert, what a prick.
Not bad.
And of course, as any good game where you haven't seen your friends in years lets you, Get absolutely shit-faced with your friends while the potential love of your life is just sitting there thinking about where it all went so wrong in life. There are some absolutely fantastic moments here, from you stealing Yen's clothes and using her megascope to contact other mages, to Lambert imitating Vesemir, you guys playing Never Have I Ever, and so many others. And this small break where you and your friends get drunk one more time leads perfectly to what is one of the tensest sections in the game. Vesemir's ritual didn't work. It is now up to Yen with just a bit of your help to see what or who hides in the body of Uma. This procedure takes hours. You can just cut the tension in these scenes with a knife. Clearly this is taking a huge toll on Yen, who by the end is barely still standing. But the procedure works, and in the spot where Uma once lay, now lies...
Avallac'h?
Oh my god, it's Avallac'h. Oh my god. Oh my... Who is Avallac'h? Oh my god. Yeah, listen, this isn't the first time that a character being brought straight out of the books into the game and me not knowing them as they started recounting our memories together has hurt my immersion. And it certainly won't be the last, but most of the times I don't really care all that much. However, this is the climax of a very, very tense scene, and I don't know. I just wish this was Ciri instead of Avallac'h. Mostly because it would make the entire part even better, but also because Avallac'h is part of one of my biggest problems with the ending of the game, and he also sends you on one of the most boring quests in the game. You don't know this yet, but he's hidden Ciri on a magical island with the only thing leading to her being this small Raymond 2 Lum looking thing. So you follow it and arrive at a quest which has 4 dwarves in a building telling you that Ciri is in there sleeping, but that they will only let you in if you find their 3 friends. So, a sleeping girl and 7 dwarves. Now, where have I heard this one before? Anyway, one of the dwarves got mauled by a fiend, one of the dwarves breaks his neck as I save him, and one of the dwarves is a bastard who can barely walk, who falls asleep every 15 seconds and you have to escort to the house for like 10 minutes, I swear. I don't know why this quest exists, to be honest, but you arrive back. The dwarves open the door, and Ciri lies there, motionless. And I just don't care.
Empathy is one of the most difficult emotions for video games to get right because unlike movies, TV shows, or books, video game stories can't just be like, hey, the main character cares about this character for reasons X, Y, and Z, and so should you, and just be done with it, because you, the player, usually are the main character. So in Far Cry 3, Jason might love his girlfriend, but I don't give a shit about them. I don't know them, I don't love them, I don't care for them, and the game didn't spend the proper amount of time letting me get to know that person because the focus is on shooting and stabbing people in the neck bone and lighting animals on fire, which is fine because my goopy goblin brain loves all that shit, but don't expect me to care about someone just because you said so.
I don't think I could have explained it in any better or more concise of a way. I can empathize with Geralt all I want. I can try to understand him and his emotions until the sun explodes. But I don't give a single fuck for this person who I have only seen on screen for 52 minutes and 28 seconds when it took me over 40 hours to get here. And most of those 52 minutes just consist of Ciri running, fainting, then running again, then a bit of fighting, and then more fainting. I don't know a single thing about her. I don't know what she likes, I don't know what she hates, I don't know what kind of person she is, and I don't know even a smidge of history between these two. But you want to know what my worst problem with this entire scene is? It's that you and Ciri sit down next to a fire, you reminisce about a few things, and she finally tells you exactly how the story of this game went ever since she arrived back at our world with her teleporting all over the place. And it makes no goddamn sense. Now, according to Ermion, the time between when Ciri first arrived in Skellige and caused a huge explosion and the time that the Wild Hunt massacred a village in Skellige is at least a fortnight. Now, I agree with this. Looking back at every single thing that has happened in the story, I'd say it's been closer to a month for it to make any logical sense when you really think about it. But sure, a fortnight will do fine. Now, where my problems start is at the start. The Wild Hunt, when ambushing Ciri and Avalach, cursed Avalach and turned him into Uma. However, according to the game's logic, this transformation took over a fortnight. Not while Ciri was in Novigrad or at the Barrens, but sometime after Avalach managed to turn Ciri into essentially a corpse and taking her to this very island we are on now. Now, I went back through my footage and what I find is people saying stuff like, a short while ago and recently the explosion at Skellige happened. Now, mind you that according to Ermion, this is at least a fortnight, and honestly, by any stretch of logic, it is actually closer to a month than a fortnight if you just look at these events here. But actually, even more time has passed since then. After transforming into Uma, he was then found by a merchant in Skellige who then traveled by boat to Novigrad where he lost Uma in a card game to the Bloody Baron. Now, even if I sit here and give the game the benefit of the doubt and say that the second this unknown merchant found Uma, he immediately left for Novigrad, and the second he arrived there, he met the Baron and lost Uma, and the Baron immediately returned back to his keep, and that we arrived on the same day as he returned, I'd still say this is at least another week of traveling, probably actually closer to 2 weeks if not more. So not only is it weird that the game is trying to make it sound like all of this happened just a few days ago when in fact it's probably been over a month, with druids apparently still examining this site with nothing to show for, but more importantly, I don't even understand how the Wild Hunt works. Ignoring that they apparently possess incredibly strong curses that take about a month to fully take effect. You know, just enough for a certain person to save another certain person, the Wild Hunt are always just a few hours or minutes or seconds ahead of us. The only reason we know Ciri is even alive is because of the spy named Hendrik who spotted her in Velen while she was living with the Baron. This is classified information that presumably only the spy and the Emperor himself possess before the Emperor inevitably divulges this information to us. More importantly, Ciri was in Velen from essentially day one when she got teleported to here from her first arrival in Skellige, where she got ambushed by the Wild Hunt. She then just spent a few days here before moving on to Novigrad. So again, this was almost a month ago, or at the very least, if you want to believe Ermion, a bit over a fortnight ago. So how did the Wild Hunt only now, like a day before we get there, find Hendrik? And more importantly, I don't even understand how they even found him at all or why they knew he possessed any information about Ciri at all. They're just a bunch of magical, constantly teleporting soldiers with giant ships. Where did they get the information about Hendrik having information about Ciri? Somehow they learned Hendrik was looking for Ciri, and somehow Palpatine returned. Great. Moving onwards from this, they tortured and killed Hendrik, but the sly devil that he is, he tucked away an important key in his boots. So any important information is safe and secure behind said key, so the Wild Hunt didn't even get anything from him that way. Now you might be saying, oh, they just tortured him, so he told them everything he knew, which is fair, but the next time we see the Wild Hunt, they are just a few seconds ahead of us in Avallac'h's secret cave. What were they doing all this time? They lost Ciri's scent for a few weeks when she was in Novigrad. It's probably been over a week since they last saw her, but just decided to do nothing in the meantime? Only now, a few seconds before us, do they go and all of a sudden know everything and everyone? You can read about Hendrik hearing rumors of a person quarreling with a witch, this witch clearly being Keira Metz and the person being Avallac'h. But how does this translate to Hendrik knowing where Avallac'h's secret hideout is and forwarding that information to the Wild Hunt? Unless you want to make me believe that Hendrik told them to question Keira, who in turn told them about the secret cave, who in return for the information didn't get killed or even hurt, she then never ever mentions this interaction to us while also being so protective of Ciri and hating of the Wild Hunt that she helps us in the defense of Kaer Morhen later on, and slowly my brain is starting to work at such a high capacity trying to salvage this story that it's about to catch on fire. Timelines don't match up. Curses are so strong and powerful that they need like 7 different things and a master sorceress with knowledge of the arcane arts to stand over them for hours and hours to lift, but only actually do anything when the story needs them. Characters for all this time have been apparently sitting on their behinds, but now that Geralt is here, everyone knows everything about everyone. And if you think I'm being unfair and pedantic, well, you're right, but just to set things completely straight, when Geralt decides to lift the curse off the Lubberkin, he says that every villager should lock the doors and draw a line of salt on the ground to prevent the spirits from entering their homes. 20 levels later, when on a random contract, the people who pay me to get rid of a monster drew a line of salt on the ground because they thought the monster was a ghost, and Geralt says that the line of salt wouldn't help and that it's just superstition. That's me being pedantic, and that's not even the best example I could have chosen. So if you think I'm being pedantic by explaining why the story only makes sense to me when I look at it in broader strokes but starts to crumble when I actually start thinking about it, please just understand that the reason I am bringing this up is because I care. I don't care that the way salt works in relation to ghosts in this world isn't consistent. There's like 5 different writers on this game. Of course something as insignificant as that will occasionally slip through. It happens. But when I don't care about any of the mechanics of the game, I start to look at the characters. And when I think many of the main characters stop making sense, or when I don't care about the main character of the game, because she doesn't feel like an actual person, just a plot device that keeps the story moving, I start looking at the story itself. And when the story itself doesn't make sense to me, what are we left with? Well, actually, we're left with my favorite part of this game, which is followed by my and many other people's least favorite part of the game, which is then followed by an ending that I don't really like. After Ciri stops telling you blatant lies about what just happened, you teleport away to Kaer Morhen, where you prepare for a full-on assault by the Wild Hunt. This preparation consists of you going to every major character you've interacted with during the game and asking them for help. If you help them in their side quest, they help you. If you didn't, they don't. Please understand that certain characters here, who shall remain nameless, I have saved from racists, been good friends with for some years now, and stayed by their side and even saved them from certain death once or twice, and yet they refuse to join me unless I do their side quests, which revolve around bringing them a few Gwent cards. Also understand that Emperor Emhyr tries giving you an entire battalion of troops with a competent general at the helm of them, and Geralt just automatically refuses, without the player having any say in the matter. I am going to mention these things and move on. Just understand I could have added another 15 minutes to this video. And I'm going to be completely honest, somehow the Battle of Kaer Morhen is my favorite part of the base game, despite half of it falling face first directly into a huge pile of manure. This set piece is filled with so much tension, it is so well executed, so well paced, that every problem I have with the main game's combat and story and characters just dissolves. What CD Projekt Red have managed to do here is nothing short of fantastic. You have your entire team ready, you have a plan that you execute, everyone knows exactly what they need to do in this battle of cataclysmic proportions. You fight tooth and nail for every inch of land, but you just slowly get pushed further and further back until only Ciri and Vesemir are left. Yen is lying on the floor unconscious, Geralt stands there frozen, helpless. Vesemir, preventing the capture of Ciri by sacrificing himself, falls to the hands of the Wild Hunt. In a fit of rage, anger and sadness, Ciri, for the first time, shows us exactly what kind of power she is capable of. Now let's talk about why this battle also sucks. You can go through this battle with everyone, receiving help from every single person you meet in the game. Hell, you can even bring Letho, a character from The Witcher 2, to this battle, and nothing changes. No matter how many or how few of your friends you bring with you, Vesemir always dies, everyone else always survives. The only difference being the fact that Lambert can die if you don't bring Kira with you, and that's it. That's seriously it. You are fighting an entire army of skilled warriors, and it doesn't matter who you bring with you, the result is always the same. It's actually even weirder than that, because if you bring Ermion with you, he helps by finding a supply of gas underneath the castle that you can use as an explosive. And Zoltan does a similar thing where he brings explosive barrels, but I found these things to more often kill me than any of the opponents. What's even worse is that if there are allies in between you and the enemies, sometimes the game just won't let you cast Igni, a very useful sign in this battle, so your allies even get in the way sometimes. Like, I might be a bit more lenient towards the fact that your friends don't change the outcome of this battle in any meaningful way, if at least they appeared in the important cutscenes, but they don't. Like, you can see them all standing in front of this door right before it gets blown open and freezing everyone behind it, but the second the cutscene starts, there's no one to be seen except for the people who will always help you in this battle no matter what. It's such a shame. Like, I wasn't expecting another Witcher 2 scenario where at the end of the game there's like 20 different small variations on the ending. And I really think if the game just ended here or soon after this battle, that the developers could have had the time to add these things. But the game just keeps on going and going. Vesemir's funeral and mine and Ciri's revenge for what these pricks did to him is fine and I do enjoy it, but then the game tells me I need to free more people for the final battle and that I need the Sunstone for the final battle, which requires me to go through some more caves. One of these caves even has a mirror puzzle. Oh joy, the epitome of great puzzles. The king's assassination and Dijkstra's betrayal happen here, the latter being easily the worst part of the game by a country mile. Then the game starts giving me hints about how Avalach, this guy who I met like 4 hours ago, is going to betray me and how I shouldn't trust him. Even my team starts doubting him. Seriously, this entire section of the game is horrible. It drags on for way too long at what feels like a glacial pace. I can kind of forgive the whole jumping between multiple worlds part purely for how fantastic it still looks even today, and how we even see a planet now covered in the white frost and what that entails, but seriously, can we pick up the pace? You have this fantastic, emotional thrill ride that has been built up to where the pace is at a breakneck speed, and instead of riding off that breakneck speed, the game decides to slow down to a glacial pace and build up to something yet again. So for the game's sake, this better be good. But it just isn't. Please understand that throughout the entire game you saw the Wild Hunt like 3 times, never having any idea who they are, what exactly they want with Ciri, what they are capable of, anything. They are just a collective generic bad guy. So for the final battle you summon the entirety of the Wild Hunt. And then you fight them, and then you fight them, and then you fight some more, and then you 1, 2, 3 defensive maneuver loop some more for what feels like an eternity, until finally the main bad guy dies. But not before even he tells me that Avallac'h betrayed me. I don't understand how I can get betrayed by a person who I just met, who I don't trust, nor do I get why this game is hyping this betrayal so much. So this man dies, Yen teleports me out of there, and for some reason, Avallac'h has decided that in order to save the universe from the White Frost, he is going to open up the fabric of space and time, essentially bringing Armageddon upon the world, and send Ciri through this opening. So, okay, time to get angry for one last time and then I'm done, I swear. This is bad for my health. A single stupid elf that I have met 5 hours ago is powerful enough on his own to just start another conjunction of spheres. The conjunction of spheres is inarguably the single most important thing that has happened to this world apart from its creation. It happened thousands of years ago and brought beings, curses, magic, diseases, and monsters from all over the universe to this one single planet, completely reshaping its entire ecosystem. It is on the same level, if not even more significant, as the meteor that hit Earth and game-ended all the dinosaurs. Yet this wasn't some random act of space or time or nature, this wasn't some celestial beings doing, it wasn't the stars aligning once every 50,000 years, or just aliens? I would have preferred aliens. The conjunction of spheres is something that some random elf can just do. And he is doing it in order to send through a girl who can already jump through space and time. She is called the Lady of Space and Time. That is her entire shtick. She can teleport between planets and planes of existence in the blink of an eye, while you need ultra-specific teleports that you don't even understand their inner workings, so you just kind of hope for the best with every teleport, and then he sends her away. Of course he doesn't betray you, and all that build-up to his betrayal was for nothing, and then depending on if you had a snowball fight with Ciri or told her she's a useless sack of shit, she either survives and destroys the frost or probably dies. By the way, how did she get back in the good ending if you needed a conjunction of fucking spheres to send her somewhere? Did she just rent an Uber back? Am I being unfair? Am I the only one bothered by this? Seriously, am I being unfair? I don't even know how to transition. Like, clearly I am deeply, and I mean deeply, unsatisfied with almost everything the base game has to offer. I hope I made it clear that I don't think this game is horrible or completely unplayable or the worst thing I have ever played, far from it, but I also want to make it absolutely clear that there are parts of this game that I loved. And I really mean that. Certain parts of this game are downright fantastic and something that game developers even to this day are trying to recreate and are failing miserably. There are parts that I know I should appreciate more that maybe just don't mean all that much to me personally, like the graphics, world design, and the approach it in any way you want story. Granted, I still don't understand why any developer would choose this and then also choose level-based combat. It kind of works against each other, but whatever, I digress. But overall, when I look back at my time with this game, and I think about how much I actually enjoyed it, it's a 4 out of 10. I dislike more parts of this game than I don't. Now, being prepared for the lackluster combat and how pointless most of the open world is means that on repeat playthroughs I'll just skip most of the game and play it on the easiest difficulty. And maybe then I'll find more to enjoy, but how the game is right now after these first 2 playthroughs, I really don't like it. Which is ironic, because this game has DLC. 2 of them in fact, with the first one, Hearts of Stone, releasing about half a year after the release of the base game. And this DLC is unironically, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the best pieces of content I have ever played in my life.
His smile fair as spring, as towards him he draws you. His tongue sharp and silvery as he implores you. Your wishes he grants as he swears to adore you. Gold, silver, jewels, he lays riches before you.
How do I even begin to explain how the same game with the same mechanics can go from a 4 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10 for me? Well, firstly, the Hearts of Stone DLC encompasses this area of the map. This already makes it incredibly difficult, almost impossible even, for me to complain about excess stuff to do and ludonarrative dissonance and such, which, trust me, I so wanted to do with the base game, but I ironically needed to cut that part out due to me not wanting to spend too much time on something. Secondly, the enemies in this DLC actually do damage. The gameplay designers figured out how broken Quen was and gave enemies attacks that just go straight through it. This is a feature reserved for only select DLC enemies and both DLCs, mind you. It might have been way better for them to just nerf Quen throughout the entire game, but with how the hitboxes are in this game, maybe it's better that they didn't. So, enemies actually doing damage, shockingly enough, leads to better gameplay and actual tension in fights.
Who had thought?
The designers also all of a sudden started to understand how annoying the music in this game can be, so look at this, a cutscene that is tense as shit without any music playing.
Olgierd von Everec. I'm looking for him.
None here by that name.
Can't help wondering. Who are you?
Who do we look like?
A crew of cutthroats? Or a band of former soldiers who got lucky?
Ah, but that's where you err. 'Cause we're sons of nobles, all.
Enemies, and even more importantly bosses, are difficult. They require your full attention. They aren't just regular enemies with a giant health bar above their head, but actual unique encounters that fit the story and world. And speaking of, how is the story? Fucking incredible! Instead of making me try to give a shit about someone with forced sad piano music, no character growth, and no time for me to spend time with said character, the Hearts of Stone DLC starts as just another monster contract, but then quickly evolves into a story that might as well be straight out of ancient Greek literature. You arrive at this giant mansion. Everything seems like you'll be doing work for some wealthy, well-off people just for you to open the door to a group of bandits. Seriously, I wish I could just let all the cutscenes and character interactions in this DLC just play out. They are so great, but unfortunately I gotta edit them down, so please, if you haven't played this DLC yet and have even the slightest intent to, pause the video and go play it. There is no tangible way for me to describe in words just how great all of it is. The bandits' leader, Olgierd von Everec, presents you with a simple task. Go kill a monster underneath the Oxenford sewers. There you meet Shawnee, a medic who you know from the first game, who might have hated your guts in the first game depending on a few choices, but here she returns and all is well no matter what. Apparently the monster that's down here is spewing poisonous mucus, poisoning the water supply. Shawnee was sent down here with a full squad of soldiers, now all dead because of the monster. This then leads to a slow descent down to the monster's lair and to one of the hardest boss fights in the game. I want to make this clear, in concept, I don't find much wrong with the boss itself. Like most enemies, there are the usual hitbox issues, certain attacks can go through Quen and take off 3/4 of your HP for no reason, but overall, this is just a fast-paced enemy that deals a lot of damage and forces you to play near perfectly in order to beat it. You kill the monster by slashing its belly wide open, covering you with what is probably the same poisonous slime that infected the water supply. You fall to the ground just to see the toad turn into a man right in front of your eyes. You pass out and awaken on a ship, now a prisoner. These people are from Ophir, a distant land, who came here to save their prince, who got turned into a toad. Man, someone really loves the Grimm brothers, don't they? With no chance of escape and off to unknown lands where he'll probably be hanged, Geralt gets ready for a long journey.
Greetings, Geralt. Remember me?
I remember. We met in White Orchard. You're
a mangy vagrant. Gaunter O'Dim, at your service.
So somehow Gaunter O'Dim found his way aboard this ship, and somehow Palpatine returned and promises you a way out. How the hell did you get on this ship? You're just a merchant. What is this shit writing again? Oh my god, he's branding me with his mind, and oh my god, he's summoned a storm, and now I'm free and in another boss fight.
I don't give a fuck. Do I look like I give a fuck? Because I don't. I don't care. I don't care. I'm great.
So you meet with this Gaunter O'Dim whether you like it or not, and he promises to get rid of the mark he put on your face and even grant you one of the following. You will lack neither food nor drink, weapons supreme, a body agile as never before, a mind faster than lightning, romantic prowess to charm any lady, or riches beyond your wild desires. But only if you help him collect 3 debts from Olgierd von Everec. Accepting to do so, you return to the mansion where you last saw Olgierd just to see the manor now burning and his men trying to behead someone.
No, you don't. Let him go.
Whoa, whoa, what the bloody hell's this? Geralt, have you decided to play defender of the downtrodden?
More like gutter of sons of bitches.
Long as I'm here, you'll gut no one. Well struck, Witcher. You win.
Yeah, do you remember how I explained that the Bloody Baron part of the base game just keeps getting more and more depressing? Welcome to Hearts of Stone, where Geralt has to deal with a man who can't be killed, a seemingly all-powerful being capable of who knows what, and yet packaged in this DLC some of the most memorable characters I have ever interacted with in a game. A story and characters ranging all the way from epic fantasy to some of the best comedy this game has to offer, to depressing lows almost rivaling those of Velen, all intermixed with one another, the character's history, morals, and decision being intertwined. It is mixed perfectly, and at the center of it all, 3 tasks so impossible to complete that Olgierd promises will go mad trying to accomplish them. You see, this to me personally is what the perfect Witcher game or questline looks like. Instead of having dozens upon dozens of characters to interact with, we have a strong base of characters that are the heart and soul of this content, that we constantly go back to and that we get attached to, are scared of, we know their motives, we know what's at stake. While every other character just serves to feel like a living person in this world that you just so happen to interact with. Instead of the other way around, where the characters we're supposed to care about are just plot devices and the interesting characters and the ones we actually get attached to are the ones that we just meet along the way, never to be seen again after a few hours. And pivoting back to the wishes and the quests surrounding them, they are fantastic. My personal favorite of the 3 being the one where you have to show Olgierd's brother Vladimir the time of his life. Vladimir has been dead for years, so the only way to show him the time of his life is to visit his grave and allow his ghost to take over your body for a night. Where Geralt, this always emotionless, sad, gruff man, is taken over by a fun-loving, no-filter-having, arrogant asshole of a man, and it is absolutely hilarious.
This is very romantic.
Fuck off. May they draw and quarter me if I've ever seen a lovelier lass.
Geralt, this jester is drunk as a skunk. I hope he's not polished off that bottle yet.
I saved your life, man. Do you not at least owe me a sip?
Course. Bottoms up.
To anyone that hasn't gotten to this part of the story on their own, showing clips of Geralt being a complete and total ass might seem cringe and completely unfunny, but as someone who has spent over 200 hours with this man, seeing him flirt with grandmas...
Not at all. I like my women as I like my peaches. Fuzzy and well-ripe.
Make everyone uncomfortable or offended, but more importantly... just have fun, be a tease, dance with donkey ears on, run after pigs, be romantic. Save the nature and animal hating David Artensborough. And take it all in good fun is so refreshing, enjoyable, and overall charming that I just can't dislike it no matter what. This could have been Geralt if he wasn't transformed against his will into what most people would call a monster. If he had a normal life. I mean, he can still show a bit of that when he makes a funny remark here or there and when romancing girls, but it's just not the same, and having this quest be in the game, to me, is worth more than any incredibly designed medieval city and then some. My least favorite of the quests has to be the one where you bring Olgierd the house of Maximilian Borsodi. As it turns out, he actually has a small-scale model of his house hidden in a giant vault. Now this all leads to a grand heist where you have to hire people to help you and then get caught in the act, and have to pretend like you're going to actually slash the necks of innocent civilians. And at the end there are differences depending on who you chose as your helpers, and of course there is a personal stake to all of this that's actually pretty great. I just really don't care for the gameplay side of this quest. Like, you can get the best team you want and this still doesn't change the fact that you arrive unseen, but then because the game has no stealth mechanics, you walk down some stairs like a dumbass and immediately get caught. This should have been a scene where you had to start improvising if you failed at stealth and got caught, not a necessary interaction. Again, it's not a bad quest, just my least favorite of the 3. And for your third wish, you are tasked with bringing Olgierd the same violet rose he once gave to his wife. Off to a creepy, desolate, haunted, faceless gardener-having house we go. Aside from the absolutely oppressive atmosphere this house and its surroundings possess, we have yet another fantastic boss fight this time in the form of the Caretaker. Just a downright completely fair boss fight that heals every time he hits you, so better get those dodge timings ready. And maybe cheese him a little bit. Anyway, the house is haunted by the ghost of Iris von Everec, Olgierd's ex-wife, who died on her bed of a broken heart that burst of sadness. The flower you're meant to bring back now long turned to dust. After finding a suitable burying ground, you bury Iris, which leads you to a world born of Iris's own dreams and memories she wants to forget, but can't. I essentially see this entire part as her very own limbo from which she cannot escape into the afterworld until she forgoes the last memento she has of her husband, the rose he gave her when they saw each other for the last time. You move through this dreamlike world, you live through some of Iris's most vivid memories. Now these memories are scattered and only give vague hints as to what happened to these once lovers. Olgierd and Iris married to the dismay of her family. One family dinner, Iris' side of the family, out of fear of Olgierd's debts bringing shame to the family name, decided to take on said debts, which he quickly refuses and throws the banknotes into a lit fireplace. The next memories already see him completely distant, with blood on his hands, pentagrams on the floor, and books about demons and the sort in his study. At first I thought this would be the scene where Gaunter O'Dim was first summoned, but Olgierd yells the words, "I wish to end our pact here." So I'm guessing the pact between them had already been signed before this moment, with us just never seeing that moment. As time goes on, he becomes more and more distant and apathetic. We see him in cold blood murder Iris's father. With his newfound knowledge of the arcane arts, he made a cat, a dog, and the Caretaker, this twisted, faceless monstrosity in an even more twisted attempt to show Iris he loves her. This entire section leads to a boss fight with Iris's greatest fear, which appears to be Olgierd himself. A twisted, broken, shambling, full of lacerations, Silent Hill-looking ass Olgierd, with him even speaking throughout the fight. Beating him leads you to finally meeting Iris herself. She is stuck in this world that she herself created, with only the rose that her husband gave to her keeping this entire world intact. She waits for him to come join her. She's waiting for her immortal husband, every second of every day thinking about what happened between them, suffering, hatred, death. Yet the fear of potential nothingness, the void, the cold darkness prevailing. And in the end, it's up for you to decide if you want to move her on to the afterlife or let her stay here for all eternity. And we are already basically at the end of this 6 to 8 hour long DLC. You return to the tavern where you last met Olgierd to turn in the rose and fulfill his final wish, but then...
Don't make me beg! More treats!
I'm no cheat. I give folk what they want, nothing more. All who have learned my true name are now either dead or have met an even worse fate. Yet I still need you. Fulfill the terms of the contract to the letter. You must do one more thing. Draw Olgierd to the Temple of Ilvani.
We never discussed that.
Oh, but we did. As a man of the world, you should know that every contract contains a catch or two. Small print, which, nevertheless, changes the ultimate meaning of the pact. Fulfill your end of the bargain, and I will remove the brand. How do you feel, Von Everec? A little less trouble? Lighter in the heart?
O'Dim, what do you want?
What do you mean, what? Your soul.
You forget. The pact states you can take it only once you fulfill 3 wishes
And we stand together on the moon. Well, what do you know?
What? No. We had a pact. The moon is there. There! Not here.
I gave you what you wished for. Here, on the moon, our contract you fulfilled.
Boss, you cheated me.
I never cheat.
I love this DLC. I absolutely adore it. From the obvious things I prefer that I already talked about to the tiny details like the fact that Shawnee perfectly foreshadows the ending.
Row me to the moon.
Gotta fly to get to the moon.
You're dead wrong. Look, it's right there, in the middle of the lake.
The fact that you can see Odin in so many cutscenes if you really squint and pay attention. Even the side quests like the one where you meet a man who studied Odin are fantastic. Sure, the DLC as a whole has certain things that it's going for that I don't fully understand and I feel like could have been explained or done better. I'll put some on the screen, but overall, it is so freaking good and such a tremendous jump in quality and enjoyment compared to the base game. I can't recommend it enough. And a bit over a year after the base game's release, CD Projekt Red released the second DLC called Blood and Wine to the masses. Instead of taking place in a land full of famine, death, and war, it took a completely different approach by being set in this almost always sunny region of Toussaint. Clearly inspired by southern France / northwestern Italy and even numerous fairy tales both in the open world and certain quests, these inspirations being juxtaposed with the heinous murders of what seemed to at first be decent, loyal men working for the Queen's Guard. The best and worst thing I can say about this DLC is that it is exactly like the base game of The Witcher 3, except that almost everything is done better. You have a massive, beautiful open world that now gives you way more gold thanks to certain quests you can take, but this gold can actually be spent on Corvo Bianco, your very own residence that you can upgrade and even decorate to a slight degree. I wish the residence itself acted even more as your base of operations, but just the fact that you can get everything from an alchemy table to sword and armor enhancers and a bed, some of which give you greater boosts than the regular ones you find in the open world, is great. Enemies actually deal damage through Quen just like the previous DLC. Side quests like collecting Gwent cards have actual markers to where you have to go to collect them all. Monster contracts no longer require you to suspend all disbelief when talking to the contract giver and aren't huge time wastes with all the Witcher sense bullshit. You run for 15 seconds, you kill the enemy, and you get your reward. That's it. None of this time-wasting bullshit that in the base game led to nothing of importance. A story that again is more focused on a select group of people that doesn't imply the end of the fucking world if you don't follow it, so you don't feel as bad if you take a break from it and explore the world a bit, but also doesn't lead to this feeling of the main antagonist being completely useless and just waiting for you. And my favorite thing about this DLC being the fact that I much prefer the ending where everyone dies to any of the other endings. Having these two survive but Detlef die seems completely wrong, just like having Detlef survive and Syanna die feels wrong. There is no way for everyone to survive, trust me, I tried. I got every single possible ending to this DLC. It required so much testing and retesting, don't even ask. So my favorite of the endings for this bright, sunny, mystical and magical DLC is for everyone to just bite the dust. Now, not everything is great. Shaelmars are an enemy introduced in this DLC that are just fucking weird and unfair at times. They can roll around and turn on a dime with no chance of you reacting, that can hit you multiple times while rolling without you having any chance of picking yourself up before the hit. The final fight with Dettlaff is also completely anticlimactic from a gameplay standpoint. Like literally almost every enemy and boss up to this point, he suffers from loop syndrome, but then in phase 2 he procures an attack that requires you to run away from and then sprint to the side to dodge it. This is the only attack in the game that requires this type of dodge and is also just a direct one-shot even through Quen. So him being the only enemy pulling this attack out of his ass with you having to go not just all the way back to the beginning of the first phase of the fight, but to the beginning of a previous cutscene every time you die is extra cheap. And then phase 3, while visually stunning, is just you dodging away from him and hitting everything else except for him. It's really bad. Certain quests, like the Wine Wars quest, are just too damn long for no reason. Having to go through the entirety of the map and then some, and then find some body in some cave on the other side of the map before talking to these two just so you get a wine named after you is borderline insulting. These flower fights range from absolute BS, from them two-shotting me out of nowhere, to some of the most fun fights in the game for me. This is also the first time that I actively noticed a weird trend that this game does, where it introduces a new enemy type to you, but instead of giving you a 1v1 fight so you get to learn the enemy's moves, usually the first thing it does is it puts you against multiple of said enemies, and then ends with you just fighting one of said enemy. It's really bizarre, it should be the other way around. But when I boil it down, I'm more disappointed in certain specific parts of this DLC. Certain enemies and certain bosses and certain quests and certain specific moves. Not anything as a whole. Not the story or characters as a whole, not every enemy and boss as a whole. Just very specific scenarios that I think could have been done better. And that is why, again, for better or worse, the Blood and Wine DLC to me is just the base game, but most of the things are done way better. 7 out of 10. Whenever I look at The Witcher 3 as its own game, you basically get these past 3 hours boiling in my head. This over 35,000 word, 55 plus page essay that I have now recorded and edited into a video. It sucks so much because I see so much potential in this game. Potential that the 2 DLCs, which both released essentially within a year of the base game, get way closer to fulfilling. Again, just think back to all the things that bothered me with the base game, all the things I found lacking or clearly rushed, all the things I actively think shouldn't be in the game or need complete reworks in order for them to even be a worthwhile addition to it. And you can watch this and disagree with a lot of what I said, that's fine, it's just one person's opinion against another. I can clearly see why someone would love this game. Hell, even just choosing a different difficulty setting than what I did could result in me giving this game 1 score higher, even though the combat at its core is still completely broken. I just hope I explained clearly enough why I personally dislike this game. And what sucks even more is the fact that I willingly went to play the first 2 games to try and bolster my enjoyment of the 3rd installment. But unbeknownst to me, I just played 2 games that I unironically enjoyed more than this game. The fact that the second game just splits into 2 different games at the midpoint is more interesting than anything related to Ciri or the Wild Hunt for me. The ending of the first game, which I won't spoil, is unironically brilliant. Yes, I did find his letter to me in The Witcher 3, and yes, I did have the biggest smile on my face when I did. Don't even ask. And at the end of the day, I played these games just so I now only have slightly more appreciation for a small specific group of characters. But then just to be disappointed by the fact that in The Witcher 2, I saved Saskia, yet she's nowhere to be found. Iorveth is also an incredibly interesting character that just stops existing in the universe after The Witcher 2. I killed Thaler in The Witcher 1 just to see him return in this game, but then I killed the son of just a nothing character, Maria Luisa Lavalette, just for her to make a small 15-second cameo in this game and now not go with me to the horse races. Just choose, for fuck's sakes. Do the previous games matter or don't they? Don't do this wishy-washy 50-50 thing. It is absolutely infuriating to play and dissect. Which leaves us with the last thing to do. Score The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt as a whole. Base game and both DLCs included. A 4 for the base game and a 7 for the second DLC is directly in the middle of 5 and 6, with the first DLC coming in clutch with a score of 9 out of 10. However, this DLC is also much shorter than the base game and even the other DLC for that fact, so for my personal enjoyment, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt gets a 6 out of 10. I hope you enjoyed. This video took months of my life to make and I hope it shows, but for my parting words and what the future holds, why try to come up with something on my own when I can just let Regis and Geralt explain it instead of me in what is now one of my favorite instances of a fourth wall break in any video game ever. Until next time, have a good one.
I so don't feel like going anywhere. Sit here a while longer?
So we shall, my friend. We have witnessed, and in fact on several occasions incited, many great and weighty events. After all that toil, I believe we deserve a bit of a rest.
That we do.